Chapter 340. Pain of Flesh. This was number 8 Liang Road. Not to mention the security in such a luxurious villa area, the ubiquitous surveillance cameras were enough to make people flinch. Moreover, there were many bodyguards of the Song family in Song Jianning's villa. Consequently, it was not easy for Zhuang Zhou and Nan Gong to get in easily. The two finally got into the community, but they could only look for opportunities outside Song Jianning's villa. At this time, they received a call from Gong's son. After answering the phone, Zhuang Zhou frowned and said to Nan Gong, who was beside him, "Gong's son and Qin Ran are already on their way to Tsingtao." He looked thoughtful. Apparently, he had already guessed the reason. That was, Qin Chang'an finally chose to reconcile with Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng was going back to Beijing. Otherwise, why would Gong's son accompany Qin Ran to Tsingtao? Nan Gong was a smart woman. She immediately understood and said, "Are they going to reconcile?" "Yes, it should be." Zhuang Zhou did not deny it. Nan Gong did not feel happy for Qin Sheng or the Qin family. Instead, she said happily, "This exhausting task is finally over. I'm going to Maldives to rest for half a month." Zhuang Zhou directly ignored Nan Gong. This girl was quite playful. He did not know how Qin Chang'an had tamed this girl. Then what should we do now? Wait for them or take action first? After feeling happy, Nan Gong faced the current problem directly. At least this was their task now. If something happened before the handover, it would be terrible. Zhuang Zhou said thoughtfully, "Gong's son told us not to act rashly. We just need to keep an eye on them and wait for them to arrive. The Song family won't do anything to Qin Sheng in a short time. What if he suffers physical pain?" Nan Gong asked with interest. Zhuang Zhou shrugged and said, "I only know not to act rashly." Nan Gong laughed in a very unladylike way. It was time to let this young master suffer. He had slept with the eldest lady of the Song family. He could not blame the Song family for making trouble for him. While Qin Sheng was suffering inside, these two big brothers and big sisters, who were protecting Qin Sheng, were making sarcastic remarks outside. If Qin Sheng knew about this, he would probably have the intention to kill them. After all, he was the young master of the Qin family. Song Jianning could not wait to kill Qin Sheng right away. However, it was against the law to kill someone. After all, he had taken Qin Sheng away in broad daylight. Even if he really wanted to kill Qin Sheng, he needed the consent of the elders in his family. He would not do such a stupid thing. Otherwise, it would be a stain on his life. Moreover, he had to worry about Song Jiqiu's feelings. Otherwise, the brother-sister relationship would change in the future. However, it was still possible for him to teach Qin Sheng a lesson. For example, he could ask the bodyguards to beat Qin Sheng up. No one would say anything. Therefore, Song Jianning said, "Beat them up." The two bodyguards took action without any hesitation. The one on the left controlled Qin Sheng, while the one on the right directly punched Qin Sheng's abdomen. Qin Sheng instantly revealed a pained expression. Anyone would not be able to take 2 punches from such bodyguards when they were defenseless. However, he did not have any complaints. After all, he had once owed them a debt. Today, it was not too much for them to collect some interest. If it had been him, he might have been more unscrupulous. The two bodyguards also knew that they should not hit people in the face. They only aimed at Qin Sheng's abdomen and back. After a while, Qin Sheng was beaten to the ground. When had Qin Sheng ever been wronged like this? However, he admitted defeat today. After all, he had offended the Song family so much. In fact, the reason why Qin Sheng admitted defeat was that he felt guilty about Song Jiqiu. He had hurt Song Jiqiu so deeply. However, Song Jiqiu did not hold it against him. These days, she put down everything and accompanied him to relax, which made his mood and state recover a lot. Moreover, at the last moment, Song Jiqiu did not hesitate to stand in front of him to protect him. If a man had a little conscience, he should feel ashamed at this moment. As he said, he was not worthy of Song Jiqiu doing so many things for him. How could he pay her back? Therefore, in the end, Qin Sheng did not want Song Jiqiu to break with the Song family. Therefore, he surrendered without putting up a fight. Seeing Qin Sheng lying on the ground in pain, Song Jianning could not help feeling much better. He walked slowly to Qin Sheng, squatted down, and said, "How do you feel? Do you regret it?" Qin Sheng grimaced in pain. A lot of sweat appeared on his forehead. However, he still insisted, "I'm sorry for the Song family and Jiqiu. As long as you are happy, Brother Ning." Song Jining snorted. "You are still as stubborn as before." After that, Song Jining stood up and kicked Qin Sheng's abdomen again. Then he scolded, "I don't understand. What's so good about you that Jiqiu likes you? I don't understand why you, Qin Sheng, are so confident that you abandoned Jiqiu after she chose you. Is your family rich and powerful? Or are you a playboy? Do you know what it means for Jiqiu to choose you? It means that you, a beast, can struggle for 50 years less. This is a great opportunity for the Qin family. Many people have been yearning for it. How could you not cherish it? Are you regretting it now? That's why you came back to harass Jiqiu? Qin Sheng, don't worry. I can tolerate Jiqiu making a mistake once, but I won't let her make a second mistake." Judging from Jiqiu's attitude today, Song Jining knew that Jiqiu still couldn't forget Qin Sheng. Otherwise, how could she treat Qin Sheng, who had not contacted for 2 years, suddenly appear in Tsingtao? Therefore, he had to give up this possibility. If he could stand, he would never sit. If he could sit, he would never lie down. A man should straighten his back. Even if he had to die, he should die like a man. Consequently, Qin Sheng struggled to get up. He did not want to lie on the ground and be trampled on. He endured the pain and replied, "Brother Ning, there are some things that I don't want to explain. You can say whatever you want. Now that I'm in the hands of the Song family, no matter what you do, I'll admit it. I owe the Song family." The tougher Qin Sheng's attitude was, the more uncomfortable Song Jining was. He gnashed his teeth with hatred. He wanted to break Qin Sheng's bones and make Qin Sheng beg for mercy in front of him. In this way, Song Jiqiu could see Qin Sheng's most spineless side. In that way, Song Jiqiu would be completely disappointed in Qin Sheng and let go of this ill-fated relationship. "I don't believe that you won't admit your mistake today. Keep beating them." Song Jining was angry and ordered again. After the 2 bodyguards heard the order, they did not care about anything else. They only needed to do things according to the rules. They could also exercise their muscles and bones. However, the poor man did not know how he had offended Song Jining. When the 2 bodyguards were about to beat Qin Sheng, Song Jiqiu finally arrived and shouted, "Stop!" Song Jiqiu, who had been in a mess, was going to find her eldest uncle. Since her eldest uncle lived in Tsingtao and her father was still in Jinan, only her eldest uncle could persuade Song Jining. However, on the way, she realized that Song Jining would definitely not let Qin Sheng have an easy time. Only when she was by Qin Sheng's side could she protect him. Consequently, Song Jiqiu had to rush back to number 8 on Liang Road. Meanwhile, she called her eldest uncle and her father and begged for mercy. Finally, she persuaded them. Qin Sheng's escape from the wedding had caused a great disturbance, so the seniors of the Song family had a strong opinion of him. Now that Qin Sheng had been caught, the seniors of the Song family would definitely seek an explanation. Everyone, including Song Jining, turned around subconsciously and looked at Song Jiqiu, who was panting and looking pale. Song Jining said angrily, "Jiqiu, are you still going to be stubborn? Is it worth it for this man? Do you want to be the enemy of the entire Song family?" Qin Sheng was tied up and looked terrible. Song Jiqiu knew that he had suffered a lot. She somewhat regretted that she had not followed him here. As she walked, she said, "Song Jining, it's not your turn to make decisions in the Song family." Song Jiqiu rarely talked to Song Jining in such a tone, except when they quarreled fiercely. However, most of the time, Song Jining would admit defeat. After all, Song Jiqiu was his younger sister. However, today, Song Jiqiu had confronted him again and again for a man who did not share the same surname, which made Song Jining very unhappy. After all, this man had hurt her and offended the Song family. Song Jining could not swallow his anger. "Even if I can't make decisions, I will always be on the side of the Song family." "Jiqiu, are you really going to protect this man?" Song Jining said word by word. No matter what happened today, he would not allow Song Jiqiu to act recklessly. Song Jiqiu nodded without hesitation and said, "Yes. Without our family's permission, you can't hurt him." Song Jianning's attitude became tougher, and he said bluntly, "If I really want to hurt him today, you won't recognize me as your brother, will you?" Song Jiqiu was speechless. She did not know how to answer for a while, because it was a difficult choice. "Brother Ning, don't make things difficult for me. Whatever you want to do, I will be with you." Qin Sheng did not want to make things difficult for Song Jiqiu. She had done so many things for him. The more she did so, the more he owed her. At this time, Song Jianning did not want to hear any sound from Qin Sheng, the initiator of all this, because all this was caused by Qin Sheng. So he was almost unable to restrain his anger. He used all his strength and punched Qin Sheng's chest hard without any warning, venting the resentment in his heart and roaring, "It's not your turn to speak here." Song Jianning's punch was so fierce that Qin Sheng did not expect it at all. He bent down in an instant and felt a piercing pain in his chest. If the two bodyguards had not supported him, he would have knelt on the ground. This scene made Song Jiqiu anxious. She shouted, "Enough, Song Jianning." After saying that, Song Jiqiu ran to Qin Sheng in a hurry. She held Qin Sheng and asked in a hurry, Qin Sheng, how are you feeling?" "I'm sorry. It's all my fault." The more Song Jiqiu cared about Qin Sheng, the more resentful Song Jianning was. He directly ordered, "Pull the eldest lady away." Several bodyguards stepped forward and were about to pull Song Jiqiu away. However, Song Jiqiu replied, "Who dares to touch me?" The bodyguards were in a dilemma. Song Jianning stared at Song Jiqiu and was very angry. The atmosphere was a bit tense. The brother and sister fought with each other again for Qin Sheng. At this moment, Song Jianning's cell phone rang. He took out his cell phone and saw that it was a call from the old master. He could not help but feel happy. He walked to the side in a hurry to answer the phone. As long as the old master supported him, he could do whatever he wanted. However, after answering the phone, Song Jianning's face did not look good. The old master told him to stop and wait until Song Jiqiu's father, who was the second uncle, came from Jinan tomorrow. The elders of the Song family would discuss how to deal with Qin Sheng. Song Jianning was quite disappointed because the old master said that he could not do anything to Qin Sheng today. Moreover, Song Jiqiu would stop him. Chapter 341. The night before, it's a new month. I'm looking for monthly votes. I want to write more this month. It was his father who called Song Jianning. After the old master passed away, Song Jianning's father was in charge of the Song family. His second uncle was in Jinan, and his third uncle was in Tianjin. They were both doing business. Both of her aunts-in-laws were from influential families, so both of her uncles were involved in politics. Coupled with the influence of the Song family in Beijing, the Song family in Shandong had quite a lot of influence in northern China, not to mention that they were an established family. Therefore, Song Jianning did not dare to disobey his father. Otherwise, he would be punished. There had been precedents. Therefore, he could only lock Qin Sheng up and wait for his father and second uncle's decision tomorrow. The two bodyguards helped Qin Sheng into the guest room. Song Jiqiu had intended to follow them, but she was stopped by Song Jianning. Of course, he would not let Song Jiqiu be alone with Qin Sheng. Who knew what would happen? At this time, Song Jianning asked all the bodyguards to leave, leaving only him and Song Jiqiu. He asked Song Jiqiu to sit on the sofa. No matter how angry Song Jianning was, he could not do anything to his sister. Therefore, he calmed himself down and tried to reason with Song Jiqiu. After pouring a glass of water for Song Jiqiu, Song Jianning sat opposite her and said, "Jiqiu, why did you do this?" "I did it for your own good. Can't you let him go?" "I don't understand. What's so good about him? 2 years have passed. He doesn't deserve you. You should start your own life and start afresh." Song Jiqiu drank some water and calmed herself down. Then she explained seriously, "Brother, if you really do it for my own good, let him go. A lot of things are not what you think they are. I've made it clear with him. This time he came to Tsingtao to relax and apologize to me. He had his reasons for what happened in the past. I've forgiven him. We are not enemies, nor will we be friends. He will leave Tsingtao tomorrow. From then on, we will have nothing to do with each other." After hearing Song Jiqiu's explanation, Song Jianning was somewhat relieved. At least Song Jiqiu and Qin Sheng were not what he had thought. However, he did not intend to let Qin Shen go. Since it was now, he still had to settle the scores in the past. That piece of ancient jade was finally obtained by the Zhang family. The old master was still thinking about it before he passed away. The Song family would not let it go so easily. Is what you said true? Song Jianing still didn't believe it. Of course, Song Jiqiu would not tell him the truth. If she had really let go of Qin Sheng, she would not have fallen in love with him that night, and she would not have had sex with him. She would only reveal her true feelings after drinking. After she got drunk, she even danced when she got home. It was obvious how she was feeling at that time. But when she woke up the next day, reality was reality. She was no longer the girl who could disregard her own safety for love. She had matured a long time ago and would no longer fall in love with anyone. As for the past with Qin Sheng, she would pretend that nothing had happened and let everything go with the wind. Song Jiqiu smiled bitterly and said, "How could I lie to you about this kind of thing?" No matter what Song Jiqiu said, Song Jianing would not let Qin Sheng off. However, he had to consider the relationship between him and Song Jiqiu. He did not want to fall out with her because of scumbag. Consequently, he said on purpose, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? You didn't give me a chance at all." Song Jiqiu believed him stupidly and said, "Brother, can you let him off now?" Song Jianing pretended to be embarrassed and said, "It's a bit difficult now. Jiqiu, you know my father already knows. Your father will come tomorrow morning. If I let him go, do you know the consequences?" Song Jiqiu had wanted to say that she would take care of everything, but she gave up in the end. She knew her eldest uncle's temper, and he would definitely not blame her. However, Song Jianing would not be able to escape. What should we do? Song Jiqiu still believed in Song Jianing because he had always been on her side. In order to spend the night peacefully and not let Song Jiqiu bother about other things, Song Jianing had to settle for the second best. "We can only do this. Let him stay here tonight. When the elders arrive tomorrow, we will plead for him together. I think the elders in our family will not make things difficult for him." Song Jiqiu thought for a while and finally agreed. It seemed that this was the only way. Song Jianing advised Song Jiqiu to go back and have a rest first and come back the next morning. Qin Sheng had been busy for half a night. However, Song Jiqiu was worried and insisted on staying here. Fortunately, Song Jianing's wife and children were not here tonight. Otherwise, Song Jianing would not have brought Qin Sheng here. Outside, after Zhuangzhou and Nangong tried their best, they finally ran to the rooftop of the villa next door and watched the situation inside through the gap of the French window curtains. Fortunately, there was no one living in the villa next door, which gave them such an opportunity. Nangong sighed and said, "This woman is really good. She can still protect him at this time. He should know how to cherish her. He shouldn't linger in the bushes of flowers and never return." As a woman, she naturally understood women. She had a high opinion of Song Jiqiu. She admired Song Jiqiu very much both in terms of her physical condition and what she had done today. Zhuangzhou did not care about these things. He looked at the time and said, "It's time to go to the airport to pick them up. Leave him alone?" It was the first time for Nangong to see such an attitude from Zhuangzhou. Zhuangzhou smiled casually and said, "A little pain is nothing to him. You definitely don't know that he is good at martial arts. You can learn from each other when there is a chance. Nothing will happen tonight. Tomorrow is the real show, but it has nothing to do with us. He won't be so embarrassed in the future." "Well, it's finally over," Nangong Chong said with a sigh. No one knew whether she meant that her mission was finally over or that Qin Sheng's bitter life was coming to an end. Only she would know. In the early morning, Qin Chang'an's Gulfstream G650 landed at Qingdao Luting International Airport. This was the most advanced private plane under the Gulfstream Group, which could fly 13,000 kilometers from Beijing to Los Angeles. Qin Chang'an had changed his bombardier to the Gulfstream G650 the year before last. Most of the time, he took this plane. After all, his identity was special, and he would arrange some special guests. During this period, Qin Chang'an was basically in Beijing. Except for Qin Ran, who used it twice, it was parked at the capital airport, which was managed by the business jet company under Air China. Zhuangzhou drove Nangong to the airport in person to welcome Gongsun and Qin Ran. For this trip to Tsingtao, they did not take anyone else with them, only the two of them. After all, this news had to be kept confidential at the moment. Otherwise, it would not be good for both Qin Sheng and Qin Chang'an. Although Qin Chang'an did not say anything, Gongsun knew what to do. Zhuangzhou and Nangong were both familiar with Qin Ran and Gongsun, so they were not so strange when they met. After receiving Qin Ran said very politely, "Uncle Zhuang's sister, thank you for your hard work during this period." This was not only for her, but also for Qin Chang'an and Qin Sheng. Without their protection, Qin Sheng might have been in trouble. Zhuangzhou chuckled and said, Ran, we are family. You don't need to be so polite." "That's right, sister," Nangong echoed. She was totally different in front of outsiders and in front of the Qin family. She was like a cold killer in front of outsiders, but in front of the Qin family, she was a little girl who could not grow up. Qin Ran said calmly, "Okay, I won't be polite." Zhuangzhou looked at Gongsun, patted his shoulder, and greeted him. "Old guy, you are finally willing to come out. How could I not come out for such a big thing?" Gongsun laughed out loud. He was very familiar with Zhuangzhou. They were old friends and had known each other for many years. Nangong was more straightforward. She gave Gongsun a hug without hesitation and said, "Uncle Gongsun, long time no see. I miss you so much. You little girl, you didn't disappoint me this time. I was really afraid that you would quit." Gongsun knew Nangong's character. She had a bad temper, so he really didn't know if she would be able to control her temper to do this kind of thing. Nangong pretended to be unhappy and said, "I don't listen to anyone. How can I not listen to you?" Gongsun smiled and said, "All right, don't show off. Let's get in the car first. It's so cold outside." After they got in the car, Zhuangzhou drove to the downtown area. Then he talked about the business about Qin Sheng. "Uncle Zhuang, how's my brother now?" Qin Ran said with a worried look. After seeing Uncle Gongsun, she knew why Qin Chang'an finally decided to let her go to Tsingtao to take Qin Sheng home. It turned out that something happened to her brother again. She did not know how he offended the Song family in Shandong and was kidnapped. Qin Ran was somewhat speechless. How could anyone bully him and trample him to death? It was not easy for him to escape from Zhejiang. Now, just as he settled in Tsingtao, he was beaten by the Song family again. How could he be so unlucky? Zhuangzhou knew that Qin Ran cared about Qin Sheng more than anyone else. Of course, he did not say what should not be said. For example, if Qin Sheng suffered some physical pain, he and Nangong could not care about it, but Qin Ran definitely would. Zhuangzhou said honestly, "Qin Sheng is fine now. He is in the villa of Song Jianing, the eldest young master of the Song family, in number 8 Liang Road. Qin Sheng's friend, the eldest lady of the Song family, Song Jiqiu, is by his side. Nothing serious will happen to him." Qin Ran frowned and said, "What does the Song family want to do?" Qin Sheng should have some grievances with the Song family. It seems that he also had emotional disputes with the eldest lady of the Song family, Song Jiqiu. That's why the Song family made such a big move. Now it seems that they will deal with it tomorrow. Zhuangzhou continued. These were all his guesses. After all, he had been following Qin Sheng these days. She did not know these things, but it did not matter. She only cared about her brother. So she said, "Well, thank you, Uncle Zhuang. I got it." Zhuangzhou asked, "Shall we go there now?" Qin Ran don't want to go there now, but obviously it would be too noisy. So she replied, "Forget it. Since we have nothing to do tonight, let's go back to the hotel and have a rest. It's very late now. We will go there tomorrow morning." Gongsun nodded silently. Qin Ran was not impulsive. She knew how to deal with things. This was also in line with Zhuangzhou's expectation. So he said with a smile, "Okay, let's go back to the hotel first. The hotel is not far from number 8 Liang Road. We can go there earlier tomorrow." Half an hour later, they arrived at the hotel. They did not say anything and checked in directly. Chapter 342. From now on, this chapter has been updated for a long time, but I didn't want to foreshadow it, or I would be scolded to death by you. So I wrote it directly. This chapter has more than 6,000 words. I haven't written such a long chapter for a long time. I'm exhausted, so you can vote for me. Coastal cities rarely had haze in winter, unlike inland cities, especially cities with poor geographical environment. Every winter was like the end of the world. So in winter, coastal cities in the south, especially those in Hainan, were the busiest time of the year. Some people even jokingly called Sanya the Sanya Special Administrative Region of the three provinces in the northeast. However, rich people could go to the south to spend the winter, while ordinary people could only continue to breathe in the haze. In addition, the gap between the rich and the poor was widening, and some contradictions became more and more prominent. As a coastal city in the north, Tsingtao was a little cold in winter, but at least there was no haze. This was already a blessing. If the weather was better, it would be more comfortable like these days. It was a new day. When the sun rose from the sea level, most people knew that today was a good day, similar to the previous days. For most people, today was no different from any other day. But for some people, today was destined to be an unforgettable day in their lives. Some people got married today. Some became parents today. Some broke up today. Some lost their loved ones today, and so on. For Qin Ran, today she would achieve what she had dreamed about countless times in the past 20 years. She would not have to suffer in the future. As for Qin Sheng, today was only a little different because he was still a prisoner, waiting to see how the Song family would deal with him. But he did not know that today would be a watershed in his life. From now on, he would be totally different. After taking a shower, Qin Ran changed her clothes and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the sea in the distance. Such weather was rare in winter in Beijing. She did not know whether it was because of the good weather or because she was going to meet her brother, but she was in a very good mood. In front of the floor-to-ceiling window, Qin Ran slowly drifted off. She was thinking about many things, such as the scene of meeting Qin Sheng later, how he would react, and what they would say. She thought that after returning to Beijing, she must take Qin Sheng back to the old house first, so that he could recall those things when he was young. She also wanted to take him to visit her mother's grave, and then take him to meet his grandmother and uncle. It was not until the phone rang that Qin Ran came back to her senses. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. She was too anxious. Everything had to be done slowly. The premise was that Qin Sheng had to accept this fact and identity first. Ran, we are already waiting for you in the lobby, Gong Sun said softly. He was more excited than usual today. As long as Qin Sheng went back to the Qin family, Qin Ran would definitely come back to live with him. In the future, the Sihyuan would be lively and would not be so deserted anymore. A few minutes later, Qin Ran came downstairs and met Nangong Gong Sun in the hall. Zhuangzhou had already gone to the parking lot to drive the car. Today, only the four of them would go to the Song family. After seeing Qin Ran, Nangong said sincerely, "Sister, you are so beautiful today." To her, today was no different than usual. However, she knew what it meant to Qin Ran. Was I not beautiful before? Qin Ran said with a faint smile. She had dressed up meticulously today and looked at herself in the mirror over and over again. Maybe she was too excited, or maybe she wanted to let Qin Sheng see the most beautiful side of her sister. Nangong immediately held Qin Ran's arm and said intimately, "No way. You have always been beautiful, but today you are even more beautiful. If I didn't know better, I would think that you were going on a date. Today is more important than a date." Gong Sun, who was beside her, teased her with a smile. Even if it was a date, Qin Ran would not take it seriously. Moreover, she never went on a date. Except for her best friends, she seldom met with men. Many young and talented men in Sijio City pursued her, and in the end, they all became her friends. Nangong covered her mouth and giggled. She did not dare to tease Qin Ran like this. Only Uncle Gong Sun had the qualifications to do so. At this time, Zhuangzhou had already driven the car to the gate. Qin Ran, Gong Sun, and Nangong walked out of the hotel. After getting in the car, they headed for number 8 on Liang Road. It was already 9 o'clock at this time. Song Jichio's father, Song Ryu, was on his way to number 8 on Liang Road. This name was given by Song Jichio's grandfather, which simply meant that a gentleman was as gentle as jade. Song Ryu had indeed become such a man. In the entire Song family in Shandong, he was the best. His character was different from Song Jianning's father, Song Hongtu. In addition to the superficial meaning of the name, Song Hong Tu mainly meant that he had 1,000 years of hegemony, and he would cut off 1,000 feet with a sharp blade in his hand. After all, Song Hong Tu was the first son of the old master. At that time, the Song family was already in a precarious situation. Therefore, the old master gave his first son such a domineering name, hoping that he could protect the foundation of the Song family and create a better future. When it came to the second son, the old master's mood was different. He hoped that he could become a gentleman and act with integrity. As for the third son, it was even simpler. His name was Song Yishur. He had 2 elder brothers to shoulder everything for him, so he should enjoy his life and not live a tiring life. Therefore, he lived a romantic life. It was unknown whether it was fate or the old master's ability to predict the future. In the end, the 3 sons all lived like their names. Therefore, a big family with a profound background was different. It was full of culture. If they were not cultured, they could only be given names like Gooden and Huzi. Song Ryu and the others set off from Jinan before 6 o'clock. Because Song Ryu had a regular schedule, he basically went to bed at 10 o'clock every night. Even if he had social engagements, he would not go past 11 o'clock. He would get up at 5:30 the next morning, exercise, eat breakfast, and start a new day. Song Jianning's father, Song Hong Tu, went to pick up Song Ryu in person. The 2 brothers had a good relationship. Even after the death of the old master, they strictly followed his will and did not have any conflicts over the inheritance. In the end, they set up a family trust fund with part of the money to support outstanding young people in the collateral family. The rest of the money was used for charity. Most importantly, they did not dare to act recklessly. After all, there was an uncle in Sijio City. If they dared to ruin the reputation of the Song family, the uncle would not be kind to them. On the way to number 8 Liang Road, Song Hong Tu and Song Ryu sat in the back of a Bentley and chatted casually. Song Hong Tu had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and a beard. He had a strong aura. Song Ryu was gentle and elegant. Wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, she looked kind and approachable. Both of them were standard burly men from Shandong, who were more than 8 meters tall. As a result, their children were not short. Song Jianning was 85 meters tall, and Song Jiqiu was 7 meters tall. Therefore, family genes were very important. Song Hongtu said casually, "Since you were in Tsingtao this time, you should stay for a few more days. Some old friends want to have a good gathering." He basically lived in Tsingtao now, while Song Ryu had always been in Jinan. Song Ryu shook his head and said, "If it were not for Jiqiu's matter, I would not have come to Tsingtao. Recently, there are many things to deal with in Jinan. At the end of the year, I still need to visit some people. The old master just passed away this year, so this year is a little special." Song Hongtu understood what Song Ryu meant. "You are right. I will go back to Jinan at the end of next month. At that time, I will also visit some places. I can't let you take care of these things." Although the old master had taken care of them in Beijing, many things had changed since the old master had passed away this year. It was better to pay more attention to them. Song Ryu nodded. The two brothers would discuss a lot of things. Neither of them would do things their own way. His brother would still ask for his opinion on many things. Song Hongtu frowned and asked, "Then how do you plan to deal with this matter?" Song Hongtu asked with a frown. Actually, it had already been 2 years since that incident. He had long forgotten about Qin Shang. The only thing that he could remember was that piece of ancient jade. However, that was something that the old master could not forget. The older generation would only fight for that bit of pride, while the younger generation did not care much about it. Song Ryu was a broad-minded person. He frowned and said, "To be honest, I just want to know why he ran away from the marriage. As long as Jiqiu can let it go, I have no opinion. We can't really kill him, so we'd better not get involved in this kind of thing. As for the ancient jade, I have no opinion on how you deal with it." Song Hongtu, who was not so broad-minded, said bluntly, "The ancient jade, the old master died with hatred. This guy has to take the main responsibility. At that time, we already got it, but in the end, he took it away. Also, the Song family has been chasing after it for so long and suffered so much. We can't let it go. Song Ryu waved his hand and said, "Okay, then we will talk about it when we see him later." He came to Tsingtao for two reasons. One was to deal with Qin Sheng, and the other was to have a good talk with his daughter. She was not young anymore, so the family could only listen to him. 10 minutes later, Song Hongtu's Bentley stopped at the door of Song Jianning's villa. Song Jiqiu and Song Jianning were already waiting at the door. Song Jianning was as obedient as a grandson in front of his father. He got along well with his uncle, Song Ryu. Sometimes when he had conflicts with the old master, his uncle could persuade him in the end. As for Song Jiqiu, she was the apple of the Song family's eye. It could be seen that when she wanted to be engaged to Qin Sheng, the Song family had agreed so easily. What an open-minded family it was. Qin Sheng should really thank the gods for the help of the Lin family. After greeting his father, Song Jianning said with a smile, "Second uncle, why have you put on weight recently?" Song Ryu replied in a low voice, "Recently, I have been busy. I haven't exercised for a long time, so I'm a little fat. Your second mother nags me every day. Don't mention it, or my daughter will stare at me." Song Jiqiu held Song Ryu's arm and said bitterly, "Father, am I such an insensible daughter?" Song Hongtu didn't have a daughter, so he treated Song Jiqiu as his biological daughter. Although the little girl from his third brother's family had just entered high school this year, she was also very favored. After all, he and his two younger sisters all had two sons. It was undeniable that the Song family was relatively prosperous. Song Hongtu smiled happily and said, "Jiqiu, your father is complaining about you not returning to Jinan. Don't fall into his trap. I can't bear to see you leave." Song Ryu said half-jokingly, "She's my daughter. How can you occupy her? If you have the ability, go and have a baby." Song Hongtu laughed and said, "Look, he is anxious." After joking for a while, they went back to the villa. Song Jianning's wife and children were not there, so it was relatively quiet in the villa. After they came in, the atmosphere was not as casual as before. Instantly, it became somewhat depressing. Song Hongtu asked directly, "Where is he?" Song Jianning replied, "Upstairs." Song Hongtu waved his hand and said, "Bring him down." Song Jianning immediately winked at the bodyguards, and the two bodyguards went upstairs to bring Qin Sheng down. Song Jiqiu took the opportunity to say, "Father, eldest uncle, I've let go of the past and forgiven him, so don't make things difficult for him." This time, Song Hongtu didn't care about Song Jiqiu, who was spoiled. Instead, he said seriously, "Jiqiu, don't say anything about what happened today. Your father and I will decide how to deal with it. It has nothing to do with you." Eldest uncle. Song Jiqiu felt the pressure. Song Jianning immediately held her and whispered, "If we talk about it later, it will only backfire." After a while, Qin Sheng was taken downstairs by two bodyguards. Compared with last night, Qin Sheng's mental state was worse. Last night, he didn't sleep at all. First, he thought about many things, such as reflecting on what had happened during this period, how to get through this crisis, and what he should do next. Second, he didn't dare to sleep. He was really afraid that Song Jianning would put him in a sack and throw him directly into the sea at night. When he went downstairs, he knew that the elders of the Song family had come. The old master of the Song family had passed away, so the elders of the Song family had to be Song Jiqiu's father, eldest uncle, or third uncle. As expected, the eldest brother and the second brother of the Song family were sitting on the sofa, waiting to deal with him. Although Qin Sheng was in low spirits, he still greeted them politely. "Say hello to Uncle Song. I'm sorry for troubling you again." Song Jianning muttered, "Damn it, you are still so stubborn. I will make you admit defeat today." Song Hongtu glanced at Song Ryu, who was looking at Qin Sheng. Song Hongtu was not very interested in Qin Sheng. He just wanted to deal with this matter quickly in case of any more trouble. "Qin Sheng, when I first met you, I didn't expect that you would be so capable. You made a mess of the Song family. As for the thing between you and Jiqiu, I regret that I agreed with Jiqiu's temper. That's fine. How dare you run away from the marriage? You made the Song family a joke. Besides, do you have a problem with the Song family?" It was not easy for us to get the ancient jade. How dare you take it away? Now the Zhang family got it again. Speaking of this, I'm angry. If I don't deal with you today, I won't be able to swallow my anger. Song Hong too was not very angry, but when he talked about the past, he became more and more angry. Song Ryu was still observing Qin Sheng. He was more or less disappointed. In his words, this young man was not as good as he used to be. In the past, he had been a high-spirited young man full of intelligence. Now, he lacked energy, qi, and spirit. He was somewhat mediocre and degenerate, which made him very disappointed. Hearing her eldest uncle's words, Song Jiqiu looked at Song Jianing in a hurry. Last night, she had promised her to plead with the elders. Song Jianing smiled gently and said slowly, "Father, you're right. We can't spare this guy. He hurt Jiqiu so badly and made the Song family lose the ancient jade. Now he dares to come to Tsingtao. Obviously, he doesn't take the Song family seriously." Song Jianing's words made Song Jiqiu dumbfounded. She stared at Song Jianing in disbelief. She did not believe that Song Jianing had said that. Didn't he promise her to plead for her? Why did he say such words at this moment? "Brother, it's not like this. You promised me last night," Song Jiqiu said with red eyes. She still hoped that Song Jianing could plead for her. At this moment, Song Jianing did not lie to Song Jiqiu anymore. He said honestly, "Jiqiu, forgive me for lying to you last night. I can promise you anything, but I can't let you do this." "No, don't do this." Song Jiqiu was somewhat on the verge of breaking down. Her eldest uncle's attitude was so tough. Her father definitely would not spare Qin Sheng. Now that Song Jianing's attitude was like this, it was impossible for her to turn the situation around by herself. Song Jiqiu cried, which made Qin Sheng feel somewhat sorry for her. He comforted her and said, "Jiqiu, don't cry. I brought this upon myself. I'll pay off what I owe you and the Song family this time." Qin Sheng really had no other way. When he had been in Hangzhou, there had been people who had helped him. He had brothers by his side and benefactors at his back. But now he was in Shandong, and he was in the Song family. The Song family was too powerful. He was alone without any helpers. He could only wait for the punishment without any room to resist. Song Hongta looked at Song Ryu and asked, "Second brother, what do you think? If you don't have any opinion, I'll make the decision." He did not make the decision on his own. Song Ryu adjusted her glasses and said, "Qin Sheng, I just want an explanation. Why did you run away from the wedding?" Song Ryu and Song Jiqiu were really father and daughter. Their questions were exactly the same. However, he did not ask a more ruthless question because he was afraid that his daughter would be hurt. He would not take such a risk. Qin Sheng explained, "I didn't have parents since I was a child. My grandfather and I depended on each other. When my grandfather passed away, he told me to walk around the country in the following 2 years and do nothing. If I had been engaged to Jiqiu, I would have been bound by the Song family. So I chose to leave." However, he was not satisfied with this reason. If Qin Sheng had said directly that he did not like Jiqiu, he might have believed him. Consequently, Song Ryu directly shook her head and said, "I don't believe this reason. Brother, you decide how to deal with it." "Dad, don't." Song Jiqiu held Song Ryu's arm and cried. Qin Sheng laughed at himself. He really could not escape this time. Even if the Song family did not kill him, they would cripple him. He was really King unlucky. Hearing that Song Ryu had agreed, Song Hongta laughed and said, "Okay, then At this moment, there was a sudden chaos outside. There were even noises and sounds of fighting, which made the Song family members frown. Song Hongta asked confusedly, "What's going on outside?" Song Jianing, who did not know what was going on, immediately arranged for the bodyguards to go out and have a look. This was a critical time to deal with Qin Sheng, so no accidents could happen. Before the bodyguards could take 2 steps forward, the door of the villa was pushed open from the outside. Qin Ran, who was dressed like a queen, walked in slowly, followed by Gongsun. Zhuang Zhou and Nan Gong, the 2 heaven-class bodyguards, were at the back. Originally, when Qin Ran and the others arrived at the door of the Song family's house, they wanted to report first before going in. However, the bodyguards of the Song family were stubborn and said that there was no one in the villa. They were all arranged by Song Jianing in advance and did not want to be disturbed by anyone. The bodyguards were just following his instructions. Of course, Qin Ran did not believe it. Since the soft approach did not work, she could only use the hard way. She would explain later. When Qin Ran led the Qin family members into the villa's living room, the first person to open his eyes wide was naturally Qin Sheng. His eyeballs almost popped out, and his mouth was so wide that a durian could almost be stuffed in. He looked like he had seen a ghost, as if he could not believe what was happening in front of him at all. He thought he was dreaming or hallucinating. Of course, he knew the woman who was walking at the front. They had met in Xiamen and Hangzhou. Although they had only met a few times, they had a good chat and had a lot of common topics. However, they did not contact each other after that. However, he could not believe it. He did not dare to believe that this woman, who he had only met a few times, would actually appear in front of him at this time today. This was beyond common sense. It was like if you told others that the universe only had the Milky Way or the solar system now. Others would think that you were a fool. However, not only that, there was something even more unbelievable. That was Zhuangzhou, whom he had lost contact with for a long time, actually appeared at the same time as this woman. What the hell was going on? Who could tell me what was going on? What exactly happened in this world? Could it be that time and space were in disorder? Qin Sheng did not believe what was happening in front of him at all. He felt that there was something wrong with his mind. Qin Sheng did not believe what was happening in front of him, but the Song family members did. They immediately recognized Qin Ran and Gong Sun when they faced the Qin family members. Because the Song family and the Qin family had some business dealings, both Song Hongtu and Song Ruyu had seen Gong Sun and Qin Ran. Gong Sun and Qin Chang'an were like shadows. Qin Ran was in charge of some specific affairs of the company and had dealings with the Song family. Moreover, the Qin family and the Song family in Beijing were old friends. How could they have seen each other before? Qin Ran walked forward slowly and said very politely, Uncle Song, please forgive us for coming uninvited and disturbing you." Song Hongtu was very confused. He did not know what Qin Ran and Gong Sun were doing. He subconsciously thought that Qin Sheng's surname was also Qin. Could they be related to Qin Sheng? However, they were very clear about Qin Sheng's background. He had nothing to do with the Qin family in Beijing. Moreover, with the Qin family's status, it was impossible for them to be related to Qin Sheng. However, why did Qin Ran and Gong Sun suddenly appear in Tsingtao and directly break into the Song family? With these doubts, Song Hongtu finally spoke on behalf of the Song family. "If I remember correctly, you're Qin Chang'an's daughter, Qin Ran? Our two subordinate companies have business dealings. The last time I saw you was in Beijing. Oh, and Mr. Gong Sun, how have you been?" Gong Sun only smiled and nodded at the Song family members. Now that Qin Ran represented the Qin family, he was not qualified to speak. "Thank you for remembering me, Uncle Song. I said hello to you and Uncle Song on behalf of my father," Qin Ran said naturally. Thinking of the man named Qin Chang'an, Song Hongtu instantly lost his confidence. He was a man he had to look up to. He smiled and said, "How is Master Qin recently? Next time I go to Beijing, I will definitely ask him for a drink. I am afraid that Master Qin will not have time. However, Qin Ran, why are you here today?" "Actually, it is not a big deal. Today I came to visit you to ask for a person. I owe you a favor." Qin Ran went straight to the topic and did not explain too much. Song Hongtu subconsciously said, "Who?" But after he said that, he already knew who Qin Ran wanted. Apart from Qin Sheng, he really could not think of anyone who could break the door and ask for a person. However, what was the relationship between Qin Sheng and the Qin family in Beijing? Why did Qin Chang'an's daughter and trusted subordinate Gong Sun come to Tsingtao personally to ask for a person? Qin Chang'an could totally make a phone call. No matter how big the hatred between them was, they had to hand Qin Sheng over obediently. Qin Ran pointed at Qin Sheng without hesitation, but she did not look at him. Because she had noticed Qin Sheng long ago, but she suppressed the excitement and heartache in her heart and forced herself not to look at him, because she was afraid that if she saw Qin Sheng at this moment, she would directly break down. As expected, Song Hong too was full of doubts, so were the rest of the Song family. Song Ryu stared at Qin Ran and frowned, wondering what was going on. Song Jianing had not come back to his senses yet. He looked at Qin Ran in a daze. This was a goddess who had once shocked him. He had tried to chase after her, but after knowing her identity, he flinched. He was somewhat excited to see her again today. At this moment, he had already forgotten about Qin Sheng. Only Song Jiqiu was extremely happy at this moment because Qin Sheng could be saved. Originally, Song Hongda did not want to ask more because he was not qualified to say this. But he could not help but say, Qin Ran, he is the enemy of our Song family. I need an acceptable reason. At this moment, the living room was unusually quiet. Everyone, including the people behind Qin Ran, was waiting for Qin Ran's reason. They all knew that from this moment on, many things would be completely different. Qin Sheng was also waiting because this was the only reason that could solve all his doubts. Qin Ran looked at the people of the Song family and took a deep breath. Then, with her eyes lit up, she said firmly, "This is my biological brother, Qin Chang'an's biological son." Her words were like a needle falling to the ground, clear and melodious, but could directly hit people's hearts. Chapter 343. Who are they? Who am I? Sometimes there were some strange things in life. Things would not develop the way you wanted them to. If you didn't want them to, they would. Often, miracles happen in this way. Many people try to find out the root of this problem. In the end, they did not know whether it was a psychological problem or a scientific problem. At this moment, this was the case for the Song family. In the living room of the villa, after Qin Ran finished her words, there was a long silence. Except for the Qin family members who had known the truth long ago, the Song family members were so shocked that they could not come back to their senses for a long time. The impossible became possible. This was something they did not dare to think or believe at all. Qin Sheng, the young man whose background they had investigated thoroughly, was actually Qin Chang'an's son? How could this be possible? Who was Qin Chang'an? He was the invisible tycoon in Sijio City, an absolute power figure. Many of his investments, both at home and abroad, had a red mark. If he was just an ordinary businessman, no one would believe it. Although his wealth was not so shocking, his influence in the political and business circles was unparalleled. He was much more terrifying than those rich people who were often seen on TV and the internet. Most people knew that Qin Chang'an only had one precious daughter. This daughter was the super fair, rich, and beautiful woman in front of them. She was the woman that many men dreamed of marrying. But no one knew that Qin Chang'an actually had a son. And this son was this ordinary man with no background, who had offended the Song family several times and was ready to be punished by the Song family. As for Qin Sheng, what had happened today had completely exceeded the scope of what he could bear. A woman whom he had only met a few times, but had no contact with, had suddenly appeared here to save him. Behind her was the man who had helped him walk through the gates of hell, but had completely disappeared recently. Then, this woman told him, an idiot who had been an orphan for more than 20 years, that he was her biological brother and that a man named Qin Chang'an was his biological father. As for who Qin Chang'an was and why the Song family was so afraid of him, he had no time to think about it. Qin Sheng's mind was already broken down. There was no logic at all. He did not know what had happened at all. He just looked at these people in front of him in a daze. He had no idea what their relationship was with him. Who are they? Who am I? This. Song Hong too was the first to return to his senses. He felt that this was too unbelievable. However, since Qin Ran could stand here with Gong Sun, it was obvious that this was the truth. Even if he did not believe it, he had to believe in the Qin clan's ability. If the information was not accurate, why would the Qin clan mobilize so many people? Qin Ran knew that no matter who she told, no one would believe her. However, she knew better than anyone else what had happened. Consequently, she replied, Uncle Song, I know it's hard for you to believe this. But this is the history of the Qin family. It's about my grandfather. Most people don't know about it. Grandfather Song, who lives in Beijing, should know about it. Song Hongtu sighed. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, he also felt lucky. If Qin Ran had not arrived in time today, she would have done something to Qin Sheng, the son of Qin Chang'an. In that case, he would have offended the Qin family greatly. It would be very troublesome to deal with it later. He could not guarantee that his uncle would have to step in. Although Song Ryu had seen a lot of things, it was the first time for him to experience what had happened today. It was like a scene from a novel. No wonder he felt that Qin Sheng was more intelligent than ordinary people when he first met him. As for what had happened later, it was out of his control. However, now that Qin Sheng had suddenly changed his identity from an ordinary person to Qin Chang'an's son, if his daughter and Qin Sheng could continue their relationship, it would be a good thing for the Song family. However, could Qin Sheng or the Qin family, who had changed his identity, take a fancy to his daughter? This was a big contrast. He did not know what to say, but he could only accept it calmly. As for Song Jianing, he felt like crying at this moment. A second ago, he wanted to kill Qin Sheng. The next second, he wanted to apologize to Qin Sheng. Big brother, you are a great man. Everything is a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart for my sister's sake. In addition, he and his second uncle, Song Ryu, had similar thoughts. He really hoped that Qin Sheng and Song Jiqiu could start over. In that case, the Song family would have a powerful ally, and he would be Qin Sheng's brother-in-law. In front of outsiders, Song Jiqiu was an extremely smart woman. However, in front of Qin Sheng and her family, she was very simple. Although she knew who Qin Chang'an was, she was only happy for Qin Sheng at this moment. First, Qin Sheng finally did not have to be wronged anymore. The Song family would not target him anymore. Second, Qin Sheng was no longer an orphan. He had a father, a sister, and a family. Song Hongta did not say anything. He did not know what to say now. The Song family had been slapped in the face. He had no time to care about these things. He needed to take a rest. This news was too shocking for him. Seeing that Song Hongta did not say anything, Qin Ran did not want to stay in the Song family anymore. So she said directly, Uncle Song, I'm sorry to bother you today. I will take my brother home first. If there is a chance in the future, I will visit you. In addition, I hope you can forgive my brother for offending the Song family in the past. As his sister, I apologize on his behalf. Hearing this, Song Hongta hurriedly said politely, No, it's just a misunderstanding. It's rare for you and your brother to meet each other. I won't keep you. Let's meet again in the future. Okay. Thank you, Uncle Song, Qin Ran said respectfully. She had been influenced by these principles since she was young. Moreover, she had been in the business world for so many years. She was also a strong woman. How could she not understand these principles? After Qin Ran finished speaking, she looked at Nangong and Zhuang Zhou behind her. They immediately understood what was going on. They quickly walked up to Qin Sheng and took him from the hands of the two bodyguards of the Song family, who did not know what had happened. Qin Sheng was still in a daze. He had not recovered yet. This was not something that could be understood in a short time. Moreover, he had to accept these facts. So he could only let Nangong and Zhuang Zhou help him to leave. Zhuang Zhou sighed. He felt sorry for Qin Sheng. No matter how the Qin family reconciled with Qin Sheng, he would eventually have to go through this stage. This was because this had completely broken too many fixed frames of Qin Sheng's life. When Zhuang Zhou and Nangong walked past Qin Ran with Qin Sheng, she finally saw his current appearance clearly. His clothes were untidy. His beard was unshaven. His hair was messy. His eyes were dull. His face was pale. His lips were chapped. He looked weak. Tears welled up in Qin Ran's eyes. She forced herself to turn her head. In the end, she did not break down. Then she said to the people of the Song family, Uncle Song, we will leave first. Sorry to bother you. Then she thought of something and said, Uncle Song, I hope you can keep what happened today a secret for me. My father does not want others to know about this. I understand. Song Hongta nodded and smiled bitterly. Then the people of the Song family watched the people of the Qin family leave. The looks in the eyes of the other people of the Song family were somewhat complicated. Song Jiqiu was worried about Qin Sheng. After sitting down, Song Hongta lit a cigarette and said with emotion, I did not expect this. It is so unexpected. I'm still in a daze. Song Ryu did not smoke. He only drank occasionally. He replied, "The world is unpredictable. We never know what will happen. This young man's life is really full of ups and downs." Song Jianing was not so emotional. After all, he did not have much contact with Qin Sheng. He just felt a little scared. "Dad, thank you for not doing anything. Otherwise, it would be troublesome." Song Hong too shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this. Jianing, everyone who knows about this today should keep their mouths shut. If I hear a word, I will not let it go easily." "I know. I will arrange it right now," Song Jianing replied in a hurry. It was obvious that the Qin family did not want others to know about this. After all, this news was somewhat influential. The Song family naturally could not offend the Qin family. Song Ryu lowered his head and smiled bitterly. He looked at Song Jiqiu beside him. His first idea had been overthrown. Everything would take its course. He did not want to care about it anymore. If Qin Sheng could start over with a woman, it would certainly be a good thing. However, if he stopped, it would not be a bad thing. Because Qin Sheng was not the Qin Sheng in the past. There would be too many variables in the future. Moreover, his daughter might not be able to adapt to the environment of the Qin family. Outside, the Qin family had already gotten in the car. Zhuangzhou and Nangong took Qin Sheng to sit in the car in front. Zhuangzhou drove, and Nangong sat in the back to take care of Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng closed his eyes and leaned against the window. He looked a little painful. Nangong was at a loss, but did not dare to disturb Qin Sheng. Qin Ran and Gong Sun sat in the car in front. This was what Gong Sun had arranged on their way here. He was afraid that there would be other mistakes. Gong Sun sat in the passenger seat, and Qin Ran sat in the back. Gong Sun wanted to say something. He hesitated for a long time and said, Ran. The look in Qin Ran's eyes was a little complicated. She was a little worried about Qin Sheng's mental state. She directly stopped Gong Sun and said, "Uncle Gong Sun, call him and tell him that we will go back to Beijing 2 days later. I'm a little worried about my brother." Gong Sun nodded in a hurry and said, "Okay, I will call him now." After a while, Qin Chang'an's call was connected. Gong Sun repeated what Qin Ran said. Qin Chang'an just said, "I got it." Then he hung up. On the way back to the hotel, no one spoke in the car in front or the car in the back. Everything was very quiet. Half an hour later, they arrived at the entrance of the hotel. As soon as the car in the back stopped, Qin Ran took the lead and ran out. Then she went straight to the car in front. In the car in front, Nangong opened the door for Qin Sheng and was about to help him out of the car. Before Qin Sheng completely got out of the car, Qin Ran had already rushed over. Under everyone's surprised eyes, she hugged Qin Sheng without hesitation. She could not control herself anymore. She broke down in an instant and burst into tears. Chapter 344. Where to go at the entrance of the hotel, Qin Ran's cries attracted many passers-by's attention. Seeing such a beautiful woman crying, everyone would have tender feelings for her, but no one dared to disturb her. When Qin Ran saw Qin Sheng for the first time, she only dared to cry silently, because she had promised Qin Chang'an that she would not recognize Qin Sheng, so she was afraid of arousing Qin Sheng's suspicion. This time, Qin Ran finally did not have to worry about anything anymore. She did not have to hide behind Qin Sheng and could only peep at him silently. She did not have to worry about him secretly, but could do nothing about it. She did not have to cry secretly in the middle of the night or when there was no one around. From this moment on, the separation of more than 20 years could finally end. From now on, she could openly tell everyone that this was her brother, her biological brother. In the future, if anyone dared to bully Qin Sheng, she could stand up for him without hesitation. Gong Sun felt a little emotional. Others did not know how deep Qin Ran's feelings for Qin Sheng were, how much suffering she had gone through in the past 20 years, and how many conflicts she had had with Qin Chang'an because of this. But he knew it better than anyone else. When they were young, the relationship between the sister and the brother was very deep. At that time, Qin Sheng, who was a few years younger than Qin Ran, would stand in front of her and protect her sister. If there was anything delicious or fun, he would give it to her immediately. This was the happiest memory of Qin Ran's childhood. Therefore, after Qin Sheng was taken away by the old master, Qin Ran suffered great pain. However, at that time, Qin Ran was still young and did not understand a lot of things. As she grew up, the pain became deeper and deeper. Today, Qin Ran and Qin Sheng finally recognized each other and reunited. The biggest crack in the Qin family would also be healed. There would be no more torture and pain in the future. Gongsun was happy for the sister and the brother from the bottom of his heart, and also for Qin Chang'an. Zhuang Zhou sighed. If he had not experienced the experience of being separated from her brother for more than 20 years, he would not understand Qin Ran's feelings at this moment. Without all the halo and identity of Qin Ran, she was just an ordinary woman like most people. At this moment, he could understand her feelings. As for Nangong, she did not like Qin Sheng at first, but this scene made her eyes red. She thought that she was cruel, but seeing Qin Ran like this, she could not help but cry. As an orphan, she understood this feeling. If it wasn't for the Qin clan, she didn't know where she would be right now, and what kind of life would she be living. Qin Sheng was somewhat at a loss. He was still immersed in his own spiritual world, thinking about many things in the past. However, the more he thought about it, the messier it became. The more he thought about it, the more contradictions and doubts he had. Qin Sheng did not know what to do with the woman in his arms who was crying her heart out, whom he had met a few times in the past, and now claimed to be his sister. However, he could feel the deep love this woman had for him. If there was no love, she would not be so sad. He seemed to finally understand why this woman had cried silently when he first met her. She had even said that he looked like a friend of hers. She should have known at that time that he was her brother. In the end, he slowly hugged the woman in his arms and patted her back gently. He did not know why he did that. It seemed to be a subconscious action, because countless broken memories floated through his mind. A familiar feeling began to arise spontaneously. Perhaps this was the so-called blood and kinship. Sister, Qin Sheng muttered to himself. This sentence was only said to himself. In the past, he and his grandfather depended on each other. Qin Sheng had always thought that he had no other relatives except his grandfather. Today, he suddenly had a sister and a father. What about his mother? Qin Sheng's unintentional action made Qin Ran, who was crying, tremble all over. She thought that Qin Sheng was calling her sister. Over the years, she had heard many people call her sister. However, she had not heard this most familiar voice for more than 20 years. Although Qin Sheng had also called her sister in Hangzhou, it was just a respectful title. It was completely different from calling her sister today. Even so, she was so happy that she cried at that time. Qin Ran was even more excited. She hugged Qin Sheng tightly again, so she waited quietly for her to finish crying. She had suppressed it for more than 20 years. Today, it was time to vent it unscrupulously. After an unknown period of time, Qin Ran finally vented enough. The number of times she had cried this year was equivalent to the number of tears she had cried in the first half of her life. She would not cry so much in the future, because the future would be filled with laughter. Qin Ran let go of Qin Sheng and said with a smile through her tears, "Sorry, I made your clothes wet." She cried and laughed at the same time. People who did not know her would really think that she was crazy. The woman in front of him was like a pear blossom in the rain. Her tears even ruined her makeup, which made her delicate face a little pale. Of course, Qin Sheng would not blame her. Even if she was not his sister, it was also a man's honor to lend a beautiful woman a shoulder. Moreover, the more he looked at the woman in front of him, the more he felt a long-lost sense of familiarity. Then he naturally reached out his hand and gently wiped away the tears hanging on the woman's face. This ordinary action melted Qin Ran's heart. It was like the warm sun in winter, making people feel extremely comfortable and warm. Because she thought of when she was young, every time she cried, her brother would also stand in front of her and stretch out his hand to wipe her tears, comforting her in a childish voice. "Sister, don't cry, don't cry. Let's go in. I don't like to be surrounded by people." Only then did Qin Ran notice that there were many passers-by around. She was a little embarrassed and blushed, but she did not feel embarrassed. Because this was her brother, she could do whatever she wanted. It was just this once, and she did not care what others thought of her. Gong Sun and Nan Gong escorted Qin Sheng, and Qin ran into the hotel. After Qin Ran told Gong Sun to call Qin Chang'an and delay their return to Beijing for 2 days, Gong Sun had already arranged to book a new room for Qin Sheng. In the hotel elevator, Qin Ran stared at Qin Sheng again and again, as if she wanted to see something. Her eyes were full of tenderness and love. If people did not know that they were siblings, they might think that they were a couple. Gong Sun and Nan Gong did not know whether to laugh or cry, but they could understand. Qin Sheng felt a little embarrassed being stared at. He had no choice but to look at the LCD screen in the elevator. Qin Ran muttered in a low voice, "It's time to cut your hair and shave your beard. Your clothes are smelly. I'll buy 2 sets of clothes for you later. What do you want to eat for lunch? I'll ask the hotel to make it for you or send someone to buy it for you." Qin Ran had never been so concerned about other men. Even Qin Chang'an did not receive such treatment. This made Nan Gong and Gong Sun, who were beside her, stunned. Qin Sheng did not answer because he had not adapted to this identity. He was still thinking about many things, so he did not know how to answer. Finally, they arrived at their floor. Qin Sheng never felt that the time spent in the elevator would be so long. After the elevator door opened, he could not wait to get out, as if he was escaping from a famine. Qin Ran, who was behind him, covered her mouth and giggled when she saw her brother's embarrassing look. Gong Sun took Qin Sheng to his room. After the door opened, the others followed Qin Sheng in. Qin Sheng urgently needed to be alone for a while, so he finally turned around and said, "I want to be alone for a while." Qin Ran came to her senses. She was a little too excited and forgot how Qin Sheng felt at this moment. So she replied, Okay. You stay alone for a while. We'll be in the next room. If you need anything, call me." After saying this, Qin Ran quickly walked to the table, found the hotel's paper and pen, and left her phone number. Qin Sheng hesitated for a few seconds and said, "Well, I want to smoke." Qin Ran was afraid that if Qin Sheng did not have any request, he would really treat her as an outsider. Hearing this, she said happily, "I'll ask someone to buy it for you." "Anything else?" Qin Sheng shook his head and said no. After saying this, he turned around and walked to the balcony of the room. His meaning was already very clear, that was to see them off. Qin Ran was very sensible. She directly left with Gong Sun, Nan Gong, and the others, and closed the door on the way. After everyone left, Qin Sheng could finally be alone. At this moment, he felt that everything in front of him might be real, and he was also real. This was not a dream, nor did he travel to another parallel space. Qin Sheng let down all his vigilance and directly lay on the bed. At this moment, he did not want to think about anything. He just wanted to sleep for a while because he was really too tired. In the next room, Gong Sun was making a call to arrange for his subordinates to go out and buy cigarettes. However, Qin Ran had forgotten to ask Qin Sheng what kind of cigarettes he wanted to smoke. So Gong Sun could only ask his subordinates to buy packs of cigarettes that were commonly seen in the market. It was estimated that the boss who sold the cigarettes would be dumbfounded by then. Nan Gong was a little worried and said, "Sister, will he be okay to leave him alone?" Based on Qin Ran's understanding of Qin Sheng during this period, she knew that Qin Sheng was not that kind of person. Hence, she said confidently, he may not be able to accept what happened today in a short period of time. He needs time to adjust, but he won't do stupid things. After all, he still has a lot of things to do. Nan Gong nodded and said, "That's good." Qin Ran looked at Nan Gong and then said with interest, "Girl, according to age, you should call Qin Sheng brother. So in the future, you will not only have a sister, but also a brother." Nan Gong subconsciously muttered in a low voice, "I will not call him brother." "What?" Qin Ran did not hear clearly and asked. Nan Gong smiled awkwardly. At this moment, she dared not to say anything bad about Qin Sheng. Otherwise, as a sister, Qin Ran would definitely be angry. So she changed the topic and said, "Sister, don't you want to buy clothes for him? Let me buy them for you." "Oh, I almost forgot about this. Let's go together." Qin Ran did not give this task to Nan Gong. This was the first time that she bought clothes for her brother. Of course, she had to go by herself. She really did not trust others. Nangang did not know whether to laugh or cry. With such a sister, Qin Sheng would probably faint in happiness in the future. Who would dare to bully him? Nangang pointed at Qin Ran's crying face and said, "Sister, are you going out like this?" Only then did Qin Ran understand. She hurriedly ran into the bathroom to put on makeup. Qin Sheng slept for a long time. When he woke up, it was already evening. The sky outside was slightly dark, and the night view of the city was just beginning to be lit. This time, Qin Sheng slept very comfortably. He had not slept so comfortably in this period of time. Every night, he would think about too many things. In the end, he could not sleep at night and was even more absent-minded. He turned on the light. When he was ready to get up, Qin Sheng found that someone had covered him with a quilt. This made Qin Sheng feel warm as heart. Because he was directly lying on the bed, he did not know when he fell asleep. The quilt was pressed under his body. The quilt on his body must have been brought by someone outside for him. After getting up, Qin Sheng saw a lot of things on the table. There were already cold dishes, newly bought clothes, and miscellaneous cigarettes. Qin Sheng was suddenly absent-minded. He recalled what had happened in the morning in an instant. This time, Qin Sheng finally knew that everything was true. Chapter 345. The Truman Show? To be honest, it's not difficult to write the climax. What's difficult is the calm period after the climax. This book has 1,000,000 words. Now, it's the most critical turning period of the book. This turning is related to the logic of the front and the back, especially the change in Qin Sheng's mind. How can he accept this identity reasonably? Otherwise, he can't write anymore. So it's a bit difficult for me to write these chapters. I hope you can understand. Ever since Qin Sheng could remember things, he had always firmly believed that he had no other relatives apart from his grandfather. Although he had asked his grandfather before, his grandfather had never told him about the past. Qin Sheng thought his grandfather didn't want to mention the sad past. After all, there were many orphans in the world, but most of them were born because of tragedies. For an old man, it was very cruel to let him recall the sad past. So Qin Sheng never asked again. However, today Qin Ran, a woman whom he had only met a few times, suddenly appeared and told him that he was not an orphan. He had a sister and a father, which completely shattered his fixed cognition for so many years. Of course, Qin Sheng had a lot of contradictions in his heart. First of all, he had to confirm whether it was true. If it was false, there was nothing to say. If it was true, there would be too many problems. Because he had to reorganize the first half of his life and doubt many things that he didn't have to doubt before. For example, was his grandfather his biological grandfather? If his grandfather was his biological grandfather, he had parents and a sister. Why did he depend on his grandfather in Xi'an? Why didn't his family look for him all these years? Why did they not find him until today? Or maybe this grandfather was not his biological grandfather, but a bad person who took him away and separated him from his family for so many years? And the next thing was why Qin Ran cried when she saw him for the first time. Did she know he was her brother at that time? But why didn't she tell the truth at that time? Or was there something that she couldn't say? She didn't recognize him when they met in Hangzhou and then in Tsingtao today. What was all this for? Then there was the problem of Zhuangzhou. Zhuangzhou appeared earlier than Qin Ran. If Zhuangzhou hadn't appeared at the last moment in Mount Jiuhua, he would have died. Then what was the relationship between Zhuangzhou and Qin Ran? What was Zhuangzhou's identity? Zhuangzhou said he had a relationship with his grandfather. Was it true? After that, it was Zhuangzhou who arranged for him and Lin Su to go to Xiamen. Then, he met Qin Ran in Xiamen. Obviously, Qin Ran and Zhuangzhou knew each other at that time. Later, Zhuangzhou arranged for him to go to Hangzhou and recommended him to Chowda. He met Qin Ran in Hangzhou. Obviously, Qin Ran and her so-called father knew about it. Because what seemed like a coincidence at that time, when he looked back, was actually intentional. Therefore, there was a possibility that Qin Ran and her father knew everything that happened after he left Mount Jiuhua. There was an even more frightening possibility that they already knew of his existence when he was in Shanghai. Qin Sheng suddenly recalled that the first time he met Qin Ran was when they brushed past each other at the Uerong Manor Hotel. If one were to make a bold guess, they might have known about him even earlier. All of a sudden, Qin Sheng trembled all over. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he felt. Why? Because he felt that his life might be controlled by others. The others might be the sister and the father behind her today, Jiang Xianbang in Shanghai, Zhuangzhou who appeared later, Chao De in Hangzhou, or others such as Xue Qinyan and so on. They might all be the chess pieces of the sister and the father behind her, while he was just a puppet in the palm of their hands. Qin Sheng was a little angry. He did not expect that the truth might be more complicated and frightening than what he saw today. If it was really like that, he would have lived in vain all these years. He had been living in the arrangements of others, just like the hero in the world of the Truman Show. He thought that he was really living in real life, but in fact, he was living in someone else's program. Everything was arranged. The last question was, what was the background of this sister and the father behind her? How could they have such great power to mobilize so many resources? It should be known that these people were not ordinary people. Any one of them was a character that most ordinary people looked up to. And what happened in the Song family today? Everyone in the Song family obviously knew this sister. For ordinary people like him, a rich and powerful family like the Song family was something that no one dared to challenge. For example, the Song family could easily control his life and death today. However, when this sister stood in front of everyone in the Song family and said a few words, the Song family did not hesitate to let him go. They did not even have the slightest intention to resist. It should be known that he had offended the Song family to death. What exactly was her background that made a rich and powerful family like the Song family so afraid of her? There were too many questions. Qin Sheng had already believed that all of this was the truth. He first took a shower and shaved. Then, he calmed himself down completely and stopped letting his imagination run wild. Instead, he tried to sort out the logic between these things seriously. He found Lacune from the pile of cigarettes, because he had been smoking Lacune during these days in Hangzhou. Qin Sheng sat on the balcony and smoked one cigarette after another. He was deep in thought like an old monk who was meditating. In the end, his eyes became more and more profound, and his face became more and more serious. He had too many questions, so he had to find Qin Ran to clarify some things. After making the decision, Qin Sheng finally put out the cigarette, but stood up and walked into the room. After hesitating for a while, he still changed into the clothes that Qin Ran bought for him. Qin Ran already knew Qin Sheng's figure very well. Moreover, she had good taste. After all, she was the daughter of a rich family, and the environment that she came into contact with since childhood was also the upper class. Naturally, the clothes that she bought for Qin Sheng were very suitable and suited his temperament. Of course, the price was not cheap. She directly went to the most high-end shopping mall in Qingdao. Qin Sheng was originally a clothes rack, so naturally, his height was needless to say. As for his figure, it was the perfect proportion that even models would envy. After all, Qin Sheng persisted in exercising since childhood, and later on, he often went to the gym. People make the man, just as horses make the saddle. When he came out after changing his clothes, he was very different instantly. It was estimated that Qin Ran, Nan Gong, and the others would be stunned. Qin Sheng had surprised Lin so many times before because he usually did not pay attention to these kinds of appearances. In the next room, Gong Sun, Zhuangzhou, and Nan Gong had been accompanying Qin Ran and waiting for Qin Sheng. They had already had dinner, but Qin Ran had not eaten yet, saying that she wanted to wait for Qin Sheng to eat together. This sister really loved her brother so much. Zhuangzhou and Gong Sun were calmer. Gong Sun had to answer the phone from time to time to deal with some things in Beijing. After all, he was the housekeeper of the whole Qin family. Big and small things had to go through him to deal with, including many people who wanted to meet Qin Chang'an, etc., had to go through his door first. After all, Nangong was young and somewhat impatient. She waited for quite a while and said rather impatiently, "Sister, he has been sleeping for such a long time. Will he be okay?" Halfway through, Gong Sun went in to send cigarettes once. Nangong and Qin Ran went in to send clothes once. And in the end, Qin Ran went in to send dinner again. Seeing that Qin Sheng had been sleeping all the time, they did not disturb him. Qin Ran said in a very distressed manner, "He is too tired. Let him have a good sleep." Nan Gong muttered in her heart. Was this Qin Sheng born from a pig in his previous life? How could he be so sleepy? He has not slept enough since noon. At most, she could only sleep for 6 hours. Moreover, during this period of time, she had slept even less, so her condition was not that bad. Just as they were talking, the doorbell rang. Gongsun walked over to open the door unhurriedly, and then he saw Qin Sheng, who had changed his clothes and was standing outside the door, looking much more energetic than he was in the morning. Gongsun was a little stunned, and then he subconsciously shouted, "Young master." Young master? This word was really refreshing, and it was the first time for Qin Sheng to hear someone call him like this, which made him feel a little strange. He had been trampled on by all kinds of young masters, but he did not expect that one day someone would call him like this. Qin Sheng did not know how to answer, so he could only nod awkwardly and said, "Is she here?" Of course, Gongsun knew who Qin Sheng was asking about. Of course it was Qin Ran, so he hurriedly stepped aside and said, "Yes, she is inside." Qin Ran and the others had already heard the conversation outside. Of course, they knew that it was Qin Sheng, so they hurriedly stood up. Qin Sheng walked in slowly, staring at Zhuang Zhou with a very complicated look, and finally called him Uncle Zhuang. No matter what, after all, Zhuang Zhou had once saved him, and later on in Shaman and Hangzhou, it was Zhuang Zhou who had helped him. Therefore, without Zhuang Zhou, there would not be the current him. As for other things, he would wait until he figured them out. Zhuang Zhou knew that Qin Sheng had a lot of questions about him. Qin Sheng was such a smart person. How could he not understand? However, he was still quite satisfied with Qin Sheng calling him Uncle Zhuang, so he smiled and nodded. After that, Qin Sheng looked at Qin Ran. He was very conflicted in his heart. He did not know how to face Qin Ran. After all, he was still not sure about this identity. It was impossible for him to act close to her. If he acted cold, it would hurt Qin Ran. After sleeping for so long, you must be hungry. I will ask the hotel to make some food. What do you want to eat? Qin Ran did not wait for Qin Sheng to speak and took the initiative to show concern. Qin Sheng did not answer this question, but directly said, "I want to talk to you." Qin Sheng wanted to talk to Qin Ran. No matter what he wanted to talk about, Qin Ran would be very happy, because this could let her and Qin Sheng interact more and understand more, and their feelings could be cultivated slowly. "Okay, then let's talk while eating." Qin Ran pursed her lips and said with a smile. Qin Sheng only wanted to figure out those questions, so he said, "I'm not hungry yet." Qin Ran's hungry stomach had long been growling. If it were not for the fact that she wanted to wait for Qin Sheng to eat together, she, who always had a regular diet, would have eaten already. Therefore, Qin Ran said with a little grievance, "I'm hungry." Qin Sheng was stunned. He stared at Qin Ran thoughtfully, seemed to understand something, and finally nodded and said, "Okay." Chapter 346. Now, Gongsun, the butler, called the hotel to arrange a private room. Qin Ran took Qin Sheng to the hotel's Chinese restaurant and did not let anyone follow them. Firstly, she was afraid that Qin Sheng would feel uncomfortable. Secondly, she wanted to be alone with Qin Sheng, otherwise their relationship would not improve. Handsome men and beautiful women were always the focus of any place. When Qin Sheng and Qin Ran appeared in the Chinese restaurant, they did attract countless people's attention. Qin Ran was a good-looking and elegant beauty. Even if her brother was ugly, he would not be that ugly. After all, his family genes were there. Moreover, Qin Sheng was not ugly, but he was not particularly handsome. He just had a unique charm, which was an advantage that men of the same age did not have. It was too depressing in the private room. Besides, Qin Sheng was afraid that the atmosphere would be awkward when he was alone with Qin Ran. He was even more afraid that there would be awkward silence. Finally, he chose a seat by the window. There was no one else around, except for their table. Outside the window was the night view of Tsingtao. They could see the bright lights of the city and the stars of the Olympic Sailing Center in the distance, which made Qin Sheng feel more or less comfortable. What do you want to eat? After they sat down, Qin Ran put her coat and bag on the chair next to her, took the menu from the waiter, and asked with a smile. Qin Sheng grew up in Xi'an. Of course, his favorite food was noodles. He did not stand on ceremony, because he was indeed a little hungry. After all, he had not eaten since last night. So he replied, "It would be best if there are noodles. If not, there should be steam buns." The waiter did not know whether to laugh or cry when he ordered dishes in the Chinese restaurant of a five-star hotel. However, he was a waiter of a five-star hotel after all, and he still had this kind of quality. Moreover, he could tell that these two were either rich or noble, so he still kept smiling. Qin Ran did not say anything. She liked Qin Sheng to be honest in front of her, so she ordered a bowl of noodles for him. However, she thought that it would not be so authentic. Then she ordered 4 dishes and a bowl of rice. "Do you have a lot of things to ask?" Qin Ran stared at Qin Sheng and said with a smile. Since she returned to the hotel, she had been smiling. She had not been so happy for many years. Qin Sheng nodded and looked a little serious. Qin Ran continued, "What do you want to ask? Just ask. As long as I know, I will definitely tell you." Qin Sheng said bluntly, "Ever since I could remember, the only relative I had was my grandfather. Since I was young, my grandfather and I depended on each other. Later, we had foster parents. Now, what has been more than 20 years? So when you suddenly appeared and told me that you were my sister and that I had parents, I didn't quite believe it." This question was expected, so Rand said with a smile, "I knew you would ask this question. I have also thought about it." Qin said. "This is also why I met you in Xiamen and Hangzhou previously. It's just that I want to get to know you first and then tell you the truth. But later, I felt that no matter how I told you, it would be hard for you to accept it in a short period of time. That's why we met like this today." After saying that, she took out her wallet from the bag beside her and took out the photo that she had treasured for many years. She slowly handed it to Qin Sheng and said, "This was taken when you were young, before you left Beijing. Grandpa took us to the Forbidden City. You definitely don't remember it, but you must know the little boy in the photo. I will tell you a lot about my childhood and show you a lot of photos. If you still don't believe me, you should believe in science. Nowadays, DNA testing technology is very advanced." Qin Sheng took the photo in doubt. This was a yellowed color photo. The background was the square in front of the Hall of Supreme Harmony in the Forbidden City. The sun was shining brightly, and there were no clouds in the sky. A 7 or 8-year-old girl was holding the hand of a 3-year-old boy. The girl's face was red. She looked a little shy in front of the camera. The innocent little boy was not restrained at all. He showed his white teeth and smiled brightly. "This is me?" Qin Sheng asked to himself naturally. The photos of him, when he was young, were taken after he came to Xin. The age difference between him and this good photo was 3 or 4 years. Children grew up faster, so there was still some gap. But the outline could still be distinguished, so Qin Sheng was a little surprised. Qin Ran did not know whether to laugh or cry. You can deny it. Just as Qin Sheng was in a daze, Qin Ran reached out to hold his arm. Under Qin Sheng's astonished gaze, she took off the old Shanghai watch on his wrist, which had been worn for God knows how many years. Qin Ran looked at the watch and said, "Do you know the story of this watch?" Qin Sheng said thoughtfully, "I just heard from Grandpa that this is the only gift my mother left for me, so I always wear it." "Well, this watch was indeed left for you by my mother. But this watch was originally Grandpa's, and this watch is a little special. No one can buy it, even if they have money. This is a custom-made watch made by the Shanghai Watchmaking Factory for high-level officials and above. Later, Grandpa gave it to my mother, and my mother left it to you. No one else has this honor." Qin Ran said slowly. She knew everything that Qin Sheng did not know. The information revealed in this sentence shocked Qin Sheng a little. First of all, he confirmed the origin of this watch. He had already begun to believe that Qin Ran was his sister. He began to look forward to the woman who had left him the only gift, which was his biological mother. Secondly, the story of this watch. It was a custom-made watch for high-level officials, so his grandfather was at least a high-level official or even higher. His mother's identity was naturally a member of the Red faction. As for what she did, it was unclear. What about his father? Thinking of the speculations about the Qin family today, Qin Sheng became more and more curious about his real identity. Qin Sheng slowly digested this information. It was really shocking to him. But he still had questions, so he continued, I want to know why I was taken away by Grandpa. Or, is this Grandpa not my biological grandpa, but someone else that I have never known? Qin Sheng's question made Qin Ran a little happy, because Qin Sheng seemed to have begun to accept his new identity. This was a good start. She explained slowly, you don't have to doubt this. This grandpa who has been with you for more than 20 years is not only your grandpa, but also my grandpa. It's just that in my memory, I don't have much of an impression of Grandpa because at that time, he was not in Beijing most of the time. Even my parents rarely saw him. Similarly, I more or less hate him because he took you away and caused me to be separated from you and your brother for more than 20 years. Qin Sheng let out a long sigh and was completely relieved. This was because the thing that he was most worried about did not happen. This grandpa who had been with him for more than 20 years was his biological grandpa. After all, in terms of feelings, of course, he was closest to his grandpa. If this grandpa was not his biological grandpa, as he thought, it might be really difficult for Qin Sheng to accept it, and he would not be able to recover in a short time. Qin Ran said honestly, as for why Grandpa took you away, I still don't know until now. If you want to know, you can ask our dad when we go back to Beijing. She really did not understand what had happened in the past. She had asked Qin Chang'an many times, but Qin Chang'an's answer was always vague. This answer made Qin Sheng somewhat surprised. He stared at Qin Ran for a while and did not continue to ask. Qin Ran asked with a smile, do you have any more questions? Of course, Qin Sheng had a lot of questions. How could it end like this? He continued to ask, when did you know that I am your brother? Qin Ran said calmly, I only found out when you were in Shaman. That's why I went to Shaman to look for you. Qin Sheng frowned and said, then why did you know the truth and reconcile with me at that time? Qin Ran sighed. She knew that Qin Sheng would definitely ask, but she had already thought of a solution. Since it was Qin Chang'an's arrangement, she would push everything to him and let him explain to Qin Sheng. Hence, Qin Ran replied, because our dad did not allow me to reconcile with him. He said that he had other arrangements. That's why we did not reconcile until today. This answer did not satisfy Qin Sheng, because he had sorted out the logic of what had happened before and after. Hence, he said, no, we met once in your own manor in Shanghai. Did we? Why didn't I know? Qin Ran said in surprise. After thinking for a long time, she really could not remember meeting Qin Sheng in Shanghai. Hence, she frowned and said, I only found out that you were my brother when you were in Shaman. So if we really met before, I definitely did not know who you are. This explanation seemed to make sense. Qin Sheng nodded silently. That time was just a passing. Maybe Qin Ran really did not remember. Qin Sheng shook his head and frowned as he said, it's still not right. You said that you only found out my identity in Shaman, but Zhuang Zhou saved my life in Mount Jihua. If not for him, I would have died in Mount Jihua. How do you explain this? Everything can't be so coincidental. How could he appear in Mount Jihua? Obviously, when I was in Shanghai, he knew my identity. That's why he secretly watched me and only appeared in Mount Jihua, Qin Sheng said, shaking his head and frowning. Qin Ran really admired this brother of hers. Obviously, he had sorted out everything. It was too difficult to fool him. She could only say, I can only say that when I knew your identity, it was when you were recuperating in Shaman. As for when Uncle Zhuang found out and how he saved you, I really have no idea. You may have to ask him when you go back to Beijing. Okay, I have another question. Qin Sheng did not expect that Qin Ran did not know about this. He did not know whether it was true or not. But since Qin Ran had already said that his father in Beijing, whom he had never met before, knew, he could ask him directly. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Go ahead, Qin Ran said calmly. How did you know I was in Tsingtao? How did you know about me and the Song family? Qin Sheng's questions were very straightforward. He did not need to hide. Qin Ran laughed and said, this question is relatively easy to answer. Because the identity you used was made for you by Uncle Zhuang. As long as we use the system to check, we will know where you are. So it's very easy to find you. Qin Ran did not dare to say that Zhuang Zhou and Nangong had been secretly protecting Qin Sheng. This was because Qin Sheng had experienced too much during this period and suffered too many setbacks. Moreover, his friend had died because of him. If Qin Sheng knew the truth, he would obviously be angry. So before she met Qin Sheng, she, Gongsun, and Zhuang Zhou had discussed countermeasures. They had to know what could be said and what could not be said. Qin Sheng did not say anything. This explanation was indeed very simple. Now, it was the age of the internet with advanced technology. Everything needed an identity. As long as he used the system, he could indeed know his location. Seeing that Qin Sheng was deep in thought, Qin Ran asked casually, "Is there any problem?" Qin Sheng shook his head. Qin Ran knew too little. Only her father knew everything. Consequently, Qin Sheng could not wait to figure out the ins and outs of everything. He did not like the feeling of being played by others. Consequently, he said without hesitation, "Let's go to Beijing." When Qin Ran heard these 3 words, she was directly stunned. After a long time, she opened her mouth and said, "Now." Chapter 347. An old house at this moment. Qin Sheng's mentality had completely changed. At first, the news and the appearance of Qin Ran and Zhuang Zhou shocked and confused him. Then his imagination ran wild, and he felt that it was impossible. After that, Qin Sheng calmed down and understood that this was indeed the truth. No matter whether you believed it or not, he began to face it calmly instead of running away and rejecting it blindly. Then, he sorted out everything again and deduced the logic behind it. Now, Qin Sheng wanted to know the ins and outs of everything and figure out what the truth was. Since Qin Ran didn't know a lot of things, he would go to the person who knew everything. That was why he said that he would go back to Beijing without hesitation, because he didn't want to waste a second. Qin Ran had wanted him to stay in Tsingtao for a few more days so that he could recover and have time to adjust and accept what had happened today. She did not expect that Qin Sheng would take the initiative to say that he wanted to go back to Beijing. Qin Ran was somewhat worried and happy at the same time. In the end, after careful consideration, Qin Ran still agreed to Qin Sheng's request. She immediately got up and called Gongsun to contact Air China to arrange the flight route. Generally, a domestic business jet route had to be applied for a day in advance. But for the Qin family, this was not a difficult matter. They only needed to contact China Airlines and then inform the Air Traffic Control Bureau. After all, this was a sudden matter, and they would not trouble others on normal days. After the call, Qin Ran looked at the dishes that had just been served and said helplessly, "I have to fill my stomach first. It will take a while for them to make the arrangements." Qin Sheng did not refuse. He was already very hungry at this time. He lowered his head and began to wolf down the noodles, not caring about how Qin Ran, who was sitting opposite him, would look at him. Qin Ran was not surprised at all by Qin Sheng's eating style. It was the same as when they were young. If it was not her younger brother, she would not have believed it. She remembered that when he was young, whether it was his parents or his maternal grandparents, they had always reprimanded him for this. However, Qin Sheng still went his own way and had no intention of changing at all. Qin Ran didn't have any objections to this. There were too many rules and frameworks in life, which always bound everyone and made people's lives very tiring and hard. Therefore, most of the time, she didn't need to care about what others thought of her. She just needed to live freely and freely. For example, the first uncle who had an epiphany. Everyone thought that he had a bright future ahead of him and that he would definitely be a leader in the future. However, he suddenly retreated and went into seclusion in the mountains to cultivate his moral character. This shocked everyone. In the hotel room, after Gongsun hung up Qin Ran's call, he prepared to call the person in charge of Air China's business jet company. At the same time, he also had to call the leader of the Air Traffic Control Bureau. Otherwise, the business jet company would not be able to handle it in a short time. "What's wrong?" Seeing that Gongsun was in a daze, Nangong asked curiously. Gongsun shook his head and smiled bitterly. Prepare to go back to Beijing. Nangong and Zhuangzhou looked at each other in dismay. This young master really knew how to make trouble. Couldn't he wait until tomorrow? On the way from the hotel to the Qingdao Luting International Airport, Qin Sheng, Qin Ran, and Gong Sun were in the same car. Nangong and Zhuangzhou were in the car behind them. The drivers were all employees of the Qingdao company. Qin Sheng liked it very much. Every night, when he was in the car, he could enjoy and observe the night view of a city through the window. However, before he had time to enjoy the city of Qingdao, he had to leave in a hurry, one city after another. Since Qin Sheng had left Xi'an, he had never stopped moving. He had been drifting. He had never stayed in any city for more than a year. The city he stayed in for the longest time was Xiamen, which was also the quietest time in the past few years. The next stop was Beijing. Qin Sheng did not know how long he could stay in this city after he figured out the truth about his parentage. At the helipad of Qingdao Luting International Airport, after the security check, the two cars of the Qin family directly drove to the helipad. This somewhat surprised Qin Sheng. He had thought that he could take any flight to Beijing, but he did not expect that his sister, Qin Ran, would arrange a private plane. However, he did not know whether it was the private plane of the Qin family or the kind of business jet of the airline company. Qin Sheng had never taken a private plane before. He had only seen it on TV and the internet. All the rich people in the country owned private planes. The Gulfstream and Challenger series were their favorites. This plane seemed to be the Gulfstream series, but Qin Sheng did not know the specific model. After getting out of the car, Qin Sheng and the others boarded the plane under the guidance of the two beautiful air stewardesses. Qin Sheng followed Qin Ran to the passenger cabin. He looked at the private plane calmly and did not appear to be very surprised. The passenger cabin was very spacious. The interior decoration and facilities looked very luxurious and high-tech. The seats were all leather sofas. There were single and double seats. There was also a sofa for multiple seats. They were scattered in the cabin irregularly and could seat more than 10 people. Qin Sheng guessed that this was either a Gulfstream G550 or a Gulfstream G650. Otherwise, there would not be such a big space. Qin Ran randomly found a seat and sat down. Qin Sheng sat opposite Qin Ran. Gong Sun, Zhuangzhou, and Nangong all sat in front. They did not disturb Qin Ran and Qin Sheng and gave them some space to be alone. The two air stewardesses started their normal service and asked the VIPs what they needed. I did not expect that my first time taking a private plane would be under such circumstances. It's really interesting. Qin Sheng smiled bitterly and joked, "The world of the rich is really different." Qin Ran did not like Qin Sheng to say such things. It would make her feel distressed because she knew that Qin Sheng had not had it easy all these years. She lived a comfortable life in Suzhou City and did not have to worry about food and clothing. Qin Sheng had suffered with his grandfather since he was a child. In the past few years, he had experienced too many setbacks and grievances. Gulfstream G650, the most advanced large business jet in the world. Our showy father just bought it last year. If you want, it will be yours from now on. I will get it for you when we go back to Beijing, Qin Ran said very generously. It seemed that as long as Qin Sheng asked, she would do her best to do anything. It was indeed a Gulfstream G650. Qin Sheng had seen the introduction about Gulfstream G650. The cruising speed was up to Mach 0. 925, the longest range could reach 13,000 kilometers, 19 seats, and so on. Of course, the price was not ordinary. It was 400 million. This was not something that ordinary rich people could have. Qin Sheng was full of curiosity about his father, whom he had not met yet. Also, he did not expect that he, a poor loser who could be trampled on by others, would become a super rich second generation in the blink of an eye. This was really dark humor. Qin Sheng did not respond to this topic. The most money he had seen in his life was when he fought in an underground boxing ring in Hangzhou. Chang Baji had won that time with his strength. Now, someone had given him a private jet. Wasn't this a fantasy story? I am sleepy. I will sleep for a while. Wake me up when we arrive, Qin Sheng said to Qin Ran. He closed his eyes and prepared to sleep. Qin Ran smiled and nodded. Okay, then sleep for a while. I will wake you up when we arrive." After Qin Sheng fell asleep, Qin Ran asked the air stewardess to bring a blanket and covered Qin Sheng personally. More than an hour later, the Gulfstream G650 landed at the Capital International Airport. Gong Sun had already arranged everything. The Qin family's 2 Mercedes were already waiting on the tarmac. When Qin Sheng woke up, he found himself covered with a gray blanket. Of course, he knew who had covered him with it. It was probably she who had covered him with the blanket in the hotel. Consequently, Qin Sheng looked at Qin Ran and said sincerely, "Thank you." Qin Sheng was not used to this new identity, so he was a little strange to Qin Ran. They were not close like siblings, but he knew that this sister was really good to him. He would remember all these in his heart. After getting in the car, the 2 Mercedes left the airport. Gong Sun had already finished the phone call. He turned around and asked, "Your father has a social engagement tonight. He is having tea and chatting with the leaders of the Ministry of Commerce and the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. He is not back yet. It is so late. Shall we go back to the Sihiyuan first?" This was the daily conversation between Gong Sun and Qin Ran. They did not hide it because of Qin Sheng's presence. But when Qin Sheng heard it, he was shocked at first, followed by more doubts. From the doubts at the beginning to the fear of the Song family, to the most advanced Gulfstream private jet worth $400 million, and then to the talk with the leaders of the Ministry of Commerce and the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. Qin Sheng became more and more curious about his father. His identity was really mysterious. Qin Ran thought for a moment and said, "Then let's go to the old house first." This was Qin Ran's original plan, but it was too late today. Obviously, Qin Sheng wanted to see Qin Chang'an first, so she did not plan to take Qin Sheng to the old house directly. But now Qin Chang'an was not back yet, so she still wanted to take Qin Sheng to the old house first. Because for her, that was the real home. There were the common memories of her, Qin Sheng, and her mother. There was nothing in the Sihiyuan that belonged to them. Okay. Gong Sun nodded silently. This was what he had expected. Then he told the driver to go directly to West Chong and Street. The old house of the Qin family was on the West Chong and Street. It was next to Yuanton and Dai Tai State Guest House. It was called Sanlai, surrounded by ministries and commissions and their families. The community used to be called the Planning Commission Compound. Anyone who was familiar with the history of Old Beijing would know that it was a magical place. The most famous one was the Red Tower Auditorium of the Planning Commission, which was the top of the 4 big auditoriums in Old Beijing. The other 3 were the Geology Department, the Materials Department, and the CPCC. Of course, this was not the most magical place of the Planning Commission compound. The most magical thing was that there were 21 deputy premiers and state councilors, more than 200 ministers and deputy ministers, and countless celebrities from all walks of life. This was the place that made a legend. However, when the sign of the Planning Commission compound was removed, the legend of this place came to an end. Today, this place was already dilapidated. Most of the places have been reconstructed. The dilapidated courtyard was only occupied by some nostalgic or retired old people. Most of the young people had left and would only come back on weekends. The Qin family of 4 used to live here. Of course, old Master Qin was not there. He was a mysterious person. However, many of the Qin family's friends also lived here. This was the foundation of Qin Chang'an's success. Without those legendary stories, there would be no Qin Chang'an today. After the 2 cars drove into the compound, they made several turns and finally stopped in front of a building in courtyard number 3. Back then, the courtyard of the Planning Commission was very big, and it was an independent world. It had everything, so it was divided into several small courtyards. In the winter night, under the yellow street lights, these old houses made people a little nervous. They got out of the car one after another. Qin Ran looked up at the red 6-story building and smiled subconsciously. All her childhood memories were here. "You guys wait downstairs," Qin Ran said to the others. This was her private space, which belonged to the Qin family. She did not want to be disturbed by outsiders. Qin Sheng frowned slightly. He knew that this was definitely not the Qin family's home. His mysterious father would definitely not live here. After all, this place was very old. Therefore, he asked, "Where is this?" Qin Ran squinted and smiled. "This is our home. It is also the place where you lived when you were young." "Home," Qin Sheng murmured. This word was familiar to him, but strange at the same time. It was because he had never had a real home. Chapter 348. Sister Won't Cry. Chapter 347. Sister Won't Cry. This chapter is too tiring. The most difficult stage is finally over. P.S. Looking for monthly tickets. As people grew older, the memories of the past would gradually be forgotten, especially the memories of childhood. As people grew older, they would become less and less clear. However, some memories would become memory fragments and be sealed in the depths of the brain. Only when they returned to a familiar environment would they be able to recall the past. It was believed that many people had such an experience. When Qin Sheng returned to this place that he was very familiar with in his childhood after more than 20 years, the fragments in the depths of his memory broke out in an instant and began to appear in his mind. The strange place began to become familiar, giving him a sense of déjà vu. Moreover, when Qin Sheng was taken away from Beijing by the old master, it was the age when children began to remember things. Those memories had been buried deep, and he would not be able to recall them if he tried to force himself to recall them. They would only reappear inadvertently, like now. Before Qin Ran opened her mouth, Qin Sheng felt that this place was somewhat familiar. When Qin Ran said that this was their home, Qin Sheng became absent-minded and then murmured to himself. Qin Sheng looked around in confusion. He did not know why he had a headache. There were more and more memories, but they always disappeared in a flash. He wanted to try hard to capture them and then put them together into a complete picture, but he could not, no matter how hard he tried, which made him a little annoyed. However, Qin Ran did not pay attention to Qin Sheng at this time. She was still staring at that familiar place. Since her mother passed away and her brother moved away, Qin Ran did not know how many times she had been here. Every time, she was alone. Sometimes she would suddenly come in the middle of the night, and sometimes when she was in a bad mood. She would come to stay for a while during festivals or on her mother's birthday, because this place was the only memory of their family of 4. After leaving this place, there would be nothing left. Therefore, no matter how bad Qin Ran's mood was, she would be very calm every time she came here. However, every time she came here, she did not know how to face her mother, because she was afraid that her mother would ask her, Ran, have you found your brother? She knew that in the past 20 years, her mother must have been very worried about her brother and hoped that their family could reunite as soon as possible. Today, she finally got her wish and did not have any psychological burden anymore. When Qin Ran came back to her senses, she found that Qin Sheng's eyes were blank and his face was pale. He even frowned and looked like he was in pain. Qin Ran quickly supported him and asked, "Brother, what's wrong?" Qin Sheng waved his hand and said, "I'm fine. Can we go up now?" Qin Sheng seemed to know that it was because he did not have enough memories that he could not piece them together. He was eager to go up and see the place where he had stayed when he was a child. If it was really the place where he had stayed when he was a child, there would definitely be more memories reappearing. At that time, he would definitely be able to recall those things when he was a child. Okay, Qin Ran nodded. Then, she helped Qin Sheng walk to the entrance of the corridor. The others did not follow them. They just waited downstairs. This was the time that belonged to this pair of siblings. It seemed that whether Qin Sheng could remember what had happened when he was young or not would depend on this. The two of them walked slowly into the corridor. The tungsten lamp, which used to be yellowish, had long been replaced by voice-activated LED lamps. However, other places had not changed at all. Qin Ran led Qin Sheng up the stairs step by step. At the same time, she talked about the things that happened when they were young, such as who lived in this house in the past, who their children were, and what kind of relationship they had with them. Qin Ran especially introduced Qin Sheng's childhood playmates. Finally, they arrived at the floor where the Qin family lived. There were 2 households on this floor. Before Qin Ran could say which was their house, Qin Sheng had already subconsciously walked to the house on the left. This was because his past memories had floated in his mind. He knew that behind this rusty metal anti-theft door was the house that Qin Ran had mentioned. Qin Ran was stunned. She did not know whether Qin Sheng had recalled the things that happened when he was a child or a random guess. However, she hoped that it was the former. Therefore, she could not wait to walk over. Under Qin Sheng's gaze, she slowly opened the two doors with the key. Then, she walked in first and turned on the light. Although this room had not been lived in for many years, it was still very clean. It was only a slight, dusty smell. An old aunt in the community would come over to clean it every week. She was an old friend of her mother's. They used to be very close to each other, like sisters. As for the furnishings in the room and so on, they were exactly the same as in the past. They had not been touched at all. However, there were all kinds of photos hanging on the wall. They were all photos of their family of 4. There were photos of her father, her mother, her brother, and her. Every time she saw these photos, she would smile very happily. In the past, when she was not sensible, she did not know why her father never came here. She thought that her father was too busy or that he liked the new and got tired of the old. It was not until she became sensible that she understood. Because this was not only a memory that belonged to her, but also a memory that belonged to her father. The reason why her father had moved away was because of the unforeseen event in the past. She had lost her mother and her brother. Similarly, her father had also lost his wife and son. She could not help but want to come back to take a look. Sometimes, she would even break down and burst into tears. However, her father had never come back because these familiar scenes would also make him break down emotionally. Here were the memories of his wife and son. However, he was a man that many people in Siju City looked up to. He did not want to be defeated by his emotions. He could not show any flaws. Only in this way could he bear the burden and move forward without fear of any enemies or setbacks. Because his name was Qin Chang'an. He was the man of the Qin family, the pillar of the Qin family. Qin Ren knew that her father had other women outside, and more than one. However, she had never mentioned this matter because her father was a normal man. She could understand. More importantly, it was because no woman had ever stepped into the Qin family. This was her father's bottom line for her, and it was also his doting love for her. Sometimes, when she was in a good mood or too busy to come over for a long time, Qin Ran would also come over to take a look. Then, she would sit quietly on the sofa and listen to Li Ronghao's Old Street. Recalling the things that happened when she was young, a faint smile would appear on her face, and she would fall asleep unconsciously. After Qin Ran came in, she had been thinking about these things all the time. It seemed that she had already forgotten about Qin Sheng, who was following behind her. However, she did not know that when Qin Sheng stepped into the room, he seemed to have become a completely different person. He looked at everything in front of him in a daze. All the memories began to resurface. There were more and more memories in his mind. There were also more and more familiar scenes. It was as if he was replaying an old movie from a long time ago. When he saw the family photo hanging on the wall, Qin Sheng's whole body trembled, as if he had been electrocuted. He stared at the woman in the family photo that had turned yellow. The background of the photo was an old Sihiyuan. There were a few trees and a lot of flowers and plants in the yard. The season seemed to be summer because they were all wearing summer clothes. The time should be afternoon, and the sun was not so dazzling. In front of the woman, a little girl was holding a little boy's hand. The two children were smiling very brightly. Next to her stood a handsome man. The woman was very beautiful. Even in this era of makeup and plastic surgery, she could be said to be a stunning beauty. She was wearing a white dress, and her black hair was tied up casually. The corner of the dress was slightly raised, and her hair was slightly messy but charming. Her cheeks were thin, not fat nor thin, just right. Her high nose bridge was straight to the sky, and her nose was full and well-proportioned. Her eyes were the most beautiful. They were not big or small, but especially lively and charming. The white of her eyes and the black of her eyes were like white paper and black ink. According to physiognomy, such a woman was kind and pure. Moreover, her eyes were crystal clear, making people feel kind and peaceful. She had a pair of curved eyebrows, and the lively eyes were a perfect match. as if they were made in heaven. As for the woman's height, it was obvious that she was not short because she was wearing high heels and had reached the man's ear. Any man who saw such a woman would be stunned. Her temperament was a little otherworldly, as if she did not belong to this world, but it was very compatible with this world. Qin Sheng just stood there and stared at her. He did not know when his eyes started to blur and then became wet. Then tears overflowed and flowed down to the corner of his mouth and chin. However, he could not stop them like an open faucet. Qin Sheng just silently shed tears, without saying or making a sound. He just let the tears flow freely, as if time had stopped at this moment. Why? Because Qin Sheng had already recognized who the woman in the photo was. He did not know how many times he had dreamed of that woman, but every time he could only see her blurry appearance. No matter how hard he tried, he could not see her real appearance clearly. He also did not know how many times he had chased after the woman's back in his dreams, and then cried out the word "Mom" heartbreakingly. Yes, she was the woman in his dreams. She was the woman who would comfort and encourage him every time in his dreams. She was his mother. "Mom." Qin Sheng finally could not help but blurt out. Qin Ran did not know when she came back to her senses. She noticed that Qin Sheng stood in front of the family photo in a daze, and then silently shed tears, looking very sad. Qin Ran was slightly stunned, and then a happy smile appeared on her face, because she knew that Qin Sheng had already recognized the family of four in the photo, and because she knew that Qin Sheng finally remembered those things when he was young. When she heard Qin Sheng call out the word "Mom," Qin Ran finally could not help but burst into tears instantly. At this moment, it seemed that all these years of waiting were worth it. Everything was worth it. Qin Sheng stared at the photo and cried. Qin Ran looked at Qin Sheng and cried. Her crying finally made Qin Sheng come back to his senses. Qin Sheng looked at the woman in front of him, and a warm smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Because those memories had been found, those pictures had been pieced together. He finally completely believed that the woman in front of him was his sister. He finally found his long-lost family, and he finally returned to the real home that belonged to him. Qin Sheng did not wipe away his tears, because they were tears of happiness, because he was no longer an orphan. From now on, his heart would have a harbor, and he would no longer be homeless. Chapter 349. Completely gone, sister, don't cry. This sentence made Qin Ran feel like she was in a dream. She seemed to have returned to more than 20 years ago. Every time she cried, the tender little guy always hugged her and comforted her with a tone that did not match his age. Sister, don't cry. After more than 20 years, Qin Sheng finally returned to the Qin family. He also recalled the things that had happened in his childhood. Both of them were very excited. At this moment, they hugged each other and shed tears of happiness. No matter who saw this scene, they would also sigh and sigh with emotion. Qin Ran bit her lower lip tightly and did not let herself cry out loud. This was the happiest moment in all these years. Qin Sheng took a deep breath and wiped away his tears. Then he hugged his sister tightly and patted her back gently, waiting for her to calm down. After a long time, Qin Ran finally let go of Qin Sheng. She wiped away her tears and smiled. Then she asked anxiously, Qin Sheng, do you really remember what happened in your childhood? Qin Sheng nodded and said honestly, yes, although I only remember a little. I know where this is, who you are, and who the woman and man on the wall are. Qin Ran could understand. After all, it had been too long. It had been more than 20 years. Anyone would have almost forgotten what had happened in their childhood. Qin Sheng definitely could only remember a little. So she held his hand and said, it's okay, as long as you remember these things. It has been more than 20 years. I have been looking for you for more than 20 years. Today, I finally bring you home. No matter what happens in the future, I will never let you leave me again. Never. Qin Sheng smiled faintly and reached out to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes. He turned around and looked at the woman in the photo. He sighed and said, sister, I miss my mother. I often dream of her, but I can't see her clearly. I have been chasing after her, but she ignored me. I miss her. I want to see her. The closest relatives in the world were blood relatives. Qin Sheng finally remembered what had happened in his childhood. He also recognized his mother. So he could not wait to see his mother, because he could only see her in his dreams every time, and her appearance was vague. Mother, for anyone, was extremely important and irreplaceable. She was the person who gave him life and the woman who loved him the most in the world. That kind of meaning could not be described in words. He had no mother since he came to Xi'an. At that time, he had no other relatives except his grandfather, especially when he saw other children had mothers who played with them and grew up with them. He was very upset. He always hid in his room and cried secretly. Only orphans could understand that kind of loneliness. It was not until he came to the Lin family and received Annie Wang's love that this feeling gradually faded. Otherwise, Qin Sheng really did not know what he would be like now. After all, everyone's personality when they were young would affect their whole lives. Mom! After hearing his words, Qin Ran, who had stopped crying, hesitated for 2 seconds. Then, her eyes turned red again. She forced herself not to break down and said, "Come with me." Qin Ran knew that Qin Sheng definitely did not remember that his mother had passed away many years ago. After all, he could only remember a few things at this moment. Hence, she turned around and led Qin Sheng into the bedroom. Qin Ran knew that Qin Sheng definitely did not remember that his mother had passed away many years ago. After all, he could only remember a little. So she turned around and led Qin Sheng to the bedroom. This was the master bedroom. When Qin Ran pushed the door open and turned on the lights, the smell of dust hit her face. It was empty inside, except for an old table placed against the wall. On the table were fresh fruits, which should have been there a few days ago. There was also an incense burner and candles. This was the master bedroom. When Qin Ran opened the door and turned on the light, a dusty smell came. It was empty, except for an old table against the wall. On the table were fresh fruits, incense burners, and candles. Of course, the woman in the black and white photo on the wall was the beautiful woman in the family photo in the living room. She was Qin Sheng and Qin Ran's mother. When Qin Sheng walked into the master bedroom and followed Qin Ran's line of sight, his mind went blank instantly. He was completely petrified. He could not help but tremble. He clenched his fists tightly and his nails dug into his palms. He stared at the photo on the wall without blinking. Qin Sheng was stunned. Of course, he knew what it meant, but he really did not expect it to be like this. All his expectations were completely gone at this moment. It was gone, completely gone. In the past, he knew that he was an orphan without a mother, but he had imagined that if he found his biological parents one day, would he be able to see his mother? But at this moment, he knew that he did not have a mother in the past, but he still had hope. But today, he really did not have a mother, and he would not have one in the future. He did not even have hope. A second ago, he was in heaven, and the next second, he was in hell. This was not just a sense of loss, but a kind of almost destructive blow. It directly knocked down Qin Sheng, who was still strong in any situation, in any enemy, and in any setbacks. At this moment, Qin Sheng was like a lost soul, like a wild ghost. His eyes and face were so terrible that people could not recognize him. It made Qin Ran feel very strange. She stared at Qin Sheng, dumbfounded. After a long time, Qin Sheng, who had been standing there, finally moved. He took a step slowly and walked to the sacrificial table step by step. Every step was so heavy, every step was so difficult, and every step seemed to be trampling on every hope he had for more than 20 years. The distance of a few steps seemed to be 108,000 miles. The time of a few steps seemed to be as far as a few centuries, but the distance of a few steps was like the distance between yin and yang. When Qin Sheng finally walked in front of the sacrificial table, he saw this man, who was like an unkillable cockroach and had walked through the gates of hell many times, suddenly kneeling on the ground with a bang. He buried his head between his legs and grabbed his hair with both hands, choking with suppressed and desperate sobs. Time stopped at this moment. Anyone who saw this scene would not be able to bear it. Qin Ran turned her back. She could not bear such emotions anymore. She was afraid that she could not bear it. In the end, she directly left the master bedroom and went to the living room, leaving time for Qin Sheng and his mother to be alone. She knew that Qin Sheng must have a lot of things to say to his mother. Qin Ran did not help Qin Sheng up, nor did she comfort him. For a man, sometimes there were some things that he had to face alone. Only when he completely vented his emotions would he feel better. If he suppressed it, it would be more terrible. Time passed by. Qin Sheng did not know how long it had been. Today, he had shed all the tears that he had accumulated over the years. He felt that there was really nothing that could make him cry in the future. He, who was still kneeling on the ground, raised his head and stared at his mother's photo. He laughed at himself and said, "Mom, I'm not a filial son. I made you wait for so many years before coming back to see you. Mom, how have you been these years? Is it because you miss me that you appear in my dreams every time? Mom, do you know that you are even more beautiful than my girlfriend? If you were by my side when I was in school, I would definitely show off to my classmates every day that I have a beautiful mother. Mom." At this moment, Qin Sheng was no longer the Qin Sheng who had a strong inner wall. In front of his mother, he was just a child who could not grow up. It had been more than 20 years. Every time, he could only see his mother in his dreams. Every time, he would be woken up with a start after saying a few words. Today, he finally reunited with his mother. He had a lot of things that he wanted to tell his mother. He wanted to tell her all the words that he had accumulated over the past 20 years and all the things that had happened to him in one go. The first time he was praised by a teacher, the first time he got full marks on a test, the first time he got into a fight, the first time he held a girl's hand, the first time he kissed a girl, the first time he fell in love, the first time he broke up with a girl, and so on. Qin Sheng wanted to tell his mother everything. It seemed that by doing so, it would be as if his mother would always be by his side. However, Qin Sheng would definitely only tell her the happy things. He would not tell her about the sorrows and setbacks, because he did not want her to worry. 1 hour passed. 2 hours later, Qin Sheng was still talking with his mother. It seemed that his mother was standing in front of him. Sometimes he would suddenly burst into laughter while talking. Sometimes he would suddenly become very depressed. People who did not know him would think that he had gone crazy. During this period, Qin Ran came to see him several times because she was really worried about his state. However, she did not disturb Qin Sheng and let him talk to himself like this. Downstairs, Gong Sun and the others have been waiting. Qin Chang'an asked someone to call them once to ask when they would come back. When he heard that Qin Sheng and Qin Ran were at the old house, he did not call again. 3 hours later, Qin Sheng finally finished saying all the things that he wanted to say. His legs were already numb. He stood up with some difficulty and then said to his mother, "Mom, it is not late. Go to bed early. I will tell you next time." After that, Qin Sheng burned a stick of incense for his mother and kowtowed 3 times. Then he turned around and left the master bedroom. In the living room, when Qin Ran saw that Qin Sheng finally came out of the master bedroom, she instantly felt at ease. However, before she said anything, Qin Sheng took the initiative to say, "Sister, can I sleep here tonight?" Chapter 350. The past life was always like this. It gave you hope and disappointed you. It made you embarrassed and exhausted. It seemed that it would be satisfied just like that. The things that happened one after another during this period of time made Qin Sheng somewhat mentally and physically exhausted. Before one thing was over, another thing came one after another. It did not give Qin Sheng a chance to breathe at all, as if it wanted to challenge Qin Sheng's limits. What happened tonight tortured Qin Sheng again, torturing this man who had suffered setbacks and vicissitudes, making him bear the pressure that did not match his age. He finally met his long-lost sister, recalled his childhood, and recognized his mother, who always appeared in his dreams. This was supposed to be a happy thing. Qin Sheng was also looking forward to reuniting with his mother, which was the biggest wish of an orphan. However, God played a joke on him and told him that his mother had passed away. To Qin Sheng, this joke was a bit too much. Only Qin Sheng himself knew what kind of mood he was in. Therefore, he knelt on the ground, hugged his head, and cried bitterly, releasing all the pressure and grievances he had suffered these days. He wanted to raise his son, but his parents were gone. Hope turned into disappointment, and happiness into sadness. If Qin Sheng's heart was not strong enough, he might have collapsed. This was sometimes the case for many people. Life didn't care whether you could bear it or not. No matter whether you refused, escaped, sad, angry, or so on, you had to face it, learn to grow up, mature, and sophisticated. Originally, Qin Ran planned to let Qin Sheng go back to the old house, which was where he stayed when he was a child. It should help him remember the past and promote their relationship. It would be great if he could remember, but it was okay if he couldn't. Then she would take Qin Sheng back to the Sihiyuan to see Qin Chang'an. However, she didn't expect that although Qin Sheng remembered the past, he didn't plan to leave. Instead, he wanted to stay here for one night. Qin Ran thought of Qin Sheng's sad look in front of her mother's coffin and felt a little sad. She knew that Qin Sheng couldn't bear to leave her mother and wanted to stay with her for a while. Otherwise, he wouldn't have talked to himself in front of her for 3 hours like a lunatic. Therefore, Qin Ran agreed. However, this old house hadn't been lived in for many years. It didn't even have the necessary daily necessities, but it was not a big deal for Qin Ran. Qin Ran said to Qin Sheng, "Take a rest first. I'll ask them to send something over." Qin Sheng nodded. He used to be very familiar with this place. This place had all his childhood memories in Beijing. Now that he had come back again, he felt that this place was both familiar and strange. Qin Sheng had to search for those memories slowly. So he looked at the old house and those old photos casually. Qin Ran walked to the balcony and called Qin Chang'an. Winter in Beijing was very cold. Gong Sun and the others had been waiting for 4 hours. Luckily, they were sitting in the car. If they were outside, they would have frozen to death. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. Not only was Gong Sun waiting, Qin Chang'an, who had already returned to the Sihiyuan, was also waiting. He was waiting to reunite with Qin Sheng. For a man who had experienced everything in life, there was nothing more important than reuniting with his biological son. After receiving Qin Ran's call, Gong Sun smiled and said, Ran, it's already 2 o'clock. Your father is still waiting for you. Can we go now?" Qin Ran smiled bitterly and said, "Uncle Gong Sun, please tell him that we won't go back tonight. Qin Sheng wants to stay here, and we'll go back at noon tomorrow." "I'll live here," Gong Sun said in surprise. Then he understood. Qin Sheng must have remembered what had happened in the past. Otherwise, he would not have taken the initiative to ask to stay here. Qin Ran nodded silently and said, "Yes. So Uncle Gong Sun, please ask someone to send some daily necessities here. There is nothing here." "Okay, you don't have to worry about this. I'll make a call right now and send them to you later." Gong Sun answered without hesitation. For him, no matter how troublesome it was, he was willing to do it, because it was a big matter for the Qin family. After receiving the call, Gong Sun first asked someone to send things over. Then he called Qin Chang'an. Otherwise, Qin Chang'an would definitely keep waiting. Ran said that young master wants to stay here tonight and can only go over tomorrow. "I've already asked someone to send things over. You'd better have an early rest," Gong Sun said calmly. "Got it." Qin Chang'an was still so calm. Nothing could make him lose his composure. He just felt a little disappointed, but he could understand. After Qin Ran finished the call, she went back to the living room. Qin Sheng was staring at a photo on the wall in a daze. It was a photo of his mother holding him. It seemed to be at the lake in Beihai Park. His mother was kissing his cheeks. Both of them were smiling very happily. Qin Ran walked over slowly and stood beside Qin Sheng. She said softly, "This is a photo of you when you were 3 years old. We went to Beihai Park together. You threw a tantrum and didn't want to walk, so your mother kept holding you." Qin Sheng's eyes were complicated. He bit his lower lip and said, "Sister, how did our mother die?" "When you were 5 years old, a car accident took your mother away." The car accident was very strange. The driver ran away after the accident. There were no clues at all. So far, no one has caught him. In those years, a lot of things happened in our family. After your mother passed away, our grandfather, who had disappeared for many years, suddenly came back. Then he took you away without saying anything. Eldest uncle, who had a bright career and high hopes, resigned from the ministry without any warning. Then he divorced his aunt. In the end, He became a monk in Mount Wutai, which shocked everyone. She also went to Canada and never came back, Qin Ran said word by word. She only knew this later. Many people were afraid of that incident. No matter how hard she inquired about it, she did not get any information. Qin Ran's eyes were wide open. These were all things that had happened. But there were many things that Qin Ran didn't say. That was when the Qin family was broken, only one man supported the back of the Qin family. He bore all the pressure and gritted his teeth to move forward. He got through the most difficult time and finally made a name for himself. This man was her father, Qin Chang'an. Although Qin Ran blamed her father for many things, she admired this indomitable man from the bottom of her heart. She didn't know how much her father had sacrificed and experienced to get to where he was today. Qin Sheng didn't expect things to be so complicated. The more he listened, the more he frowned. His intuition told him that what happened in those years was far more complicated than he had imagined. This was definitely a premeditated plot against the Qin family. However, he also learned some rough information about the Qin family from his sister's brief words. That was, apart from his sister and father, he also had an uncle who became a monk in Mount Wutai and an aunt in Canada. Sister, don't worry. I will definitely find the murderer and give her mother an explanation. Although many memories about his mother were in his dreams when he was young, it didn't affect Qin Sheng's feelings for his mother. This kind of feeling was irreplaceable. Since his mother was killed, although his sister didn't say it directly, Qin Sheng's intuition told him so. This kind of hatred, for anyone, as a son, would try his best to kill the enemy with his own hands and seek justice for his dead mother. Qin Ran held her brother's hand and said with gentle eyes, I believe you. Qin Ran could understand Qin Sheng's feelings. Anyone would do the same. But Qin Ran didn't want Qin Sheng to get involved in what happened in those years. After all, the things in those years were very complicated. Those who dared to attack the Qin family were definitely not ordinary people. However, Qin Ran didn't say so. Otherwise, it would hurt Qin Sheng. Afraid that Qin Sheng would continue to ask about the past, Qin Ran quickly changed the topic and said, Let's not talk about these trivial things. Let me tell you about your childhood. You were very smart when you were a child. Everyone liked you, you little rascal. Every time you went to Grandma's house, Grandpa and Grandma insisted that you stay for a few more days. Uncle always bought you anything good as soon as he had it, which made me very jealous. But after you came back, you gave them all to me. And the New Year's money, no one wanted to give it to you. You insisted that I keep it for you, which made everyone laugh. Qin Ran was amused by herself, as she said. Qin Sheng also couldn't help laughing. He didn't expect that he was so cute when he was a child. He asked casually, Are Grandpa and Grandma still alive? Alas, Grandpa passed away a few years ago. When he left, he was still thinking about you. He said that it was his biggest regret that he couldn't see you again. But Grandma is still in good health. Sometimes she is in Beijing, sometimes she is in Shanghai. During this period, she is spending the winter in Sanya. After a while, I will take you to see them. I think they will definitely not dare to believe it. Qin Ran pulled Qin Sheng to sit on the sofa and said with a smile. Qin Sheng nodded and said, Okay. The word family could be said to be very simple, but it could also be said to be very complicated. However, nothing could change something like bloodline. The sister and brother chatted like this, talking about the things that happened in their childhood, talking about the relatives, elders, and peers in the family, until Gong Sun sent someone to send some daily necessities. There was a bed in the secondary bedroom. At this moment, it had been tidied up and the bed sheets and quilts were laid. Qin Sheng let his sister sleep in the secondary bedroom. He would sleep on the sofa casually for the night. Qin Ran couldn't refuse, so she finally listened to Qin Sheng's arrangement. After saying goodnight to his sister and sending Gong Sun and the others away, Qin Sheng turned off the light and lay on the sofa. Although the winter in Beijing was very cold, there was heating in the old house, so it was not cold at all. Qin Sheng couldn't fall asleep. He kept thinking about things. He still felt very lost and regretful about not being able to see his mother again. He meant if, as long as he could see his mother again, he would exchange anything. Unfortunately, this was destined to be impossible. It was destined to be a regret. Unconsciously, Qin Sheng fell asleep like this. He slept very soundly. For the first time in so many years, he felt so close to his mother, as if he had found a feeling of being held in his mother's arms and coaxed to sleep when he was young. In his sleep, the corners of Qin Sheng's mouth curled up slightly. The corners of his eyes even narrowed into a line, as if he was smiling like a flower. Chapter 351. Deja vu. After they went to bed, Gong Sun went back to the Sihiyuan. He needed to arrange a lot of things tomorrow. After all, he was the chief butler of the Qin family. Zhuang Zhou and Nan Gong had to spend the night in the car outside. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the weather outside suddenly changed. The cold wind howled, and it didn't take long for heavy snow to fall. This was the first snow of winter in Beijing this year. It came earlier and heavier than usual. When Qin Ran woke up, it was already snowing heavily. It was a vast expanse of whiteness outside, wrapped in silver. It was a completely white world. The heater in the house was very hot, and the windows were full of water vapor. It was so hazy that the outside world could not be seen at all. Qin Ran was a little absent-minded. There was a familiar feeling. It was as if they had returned to the winter when they were young, waiting for their mother to wake them up for dinner. Qin Ran put on her clothes and got out of bed. After she opened the window, the cold air hit her face and made her eyes red instantly. However, she was pleasantly surprised. She said excitedly, "It's snowing." In the courtyard, the children were the most excited. They were playing wantonly in the snow, and the air was filled with their laughter. When they were young, it was the same for them. When it snowed, she would bring her younger brother to play with the children in the yard in the snow. They would make snowmen, have snowball fights, and so on. When they returned home, they would always be scolded by their father, but their mother would smile and say that it was fine. The elderly, who were wrapped up tightly, stood not far away with teacups in their hands. They stared at the children smilingly and then shouted in fear, "Be careful, be careful." If she didn't look at the tall buildings in the distance, she would really think that she had traveled back to her childhood. If that was the case, it would be great. After coming back to her senses, Qin Ran remembered what had happened last night. Her face instantly became as bright as a flower, and her eyes were full of warmth. She closed the window slowly and walked out of the room to the living room. Qin Sheng was sleeping soundly on the sofa in the living room. However, his posture was a little weird, and the quilt was kicked to the ground. Qin Ran couldn't help but laugh. He was still the same as when he was young. He liked to kick the quilt and sleep restlessly. Qin Ran walked over slowly. She didn't intend to wake him up. She was going to cover him with the quilt and let him sleep a little longer. Then she went out to buy breakfast and woke him up. When she walked to him, Qin Sheng, who had been very vigilant these days, woke up instantly. He suddenly stood up and looked at her with horror in his eyes. Qin Ran was startled and almost fell to the ground. Qin Sheng came to himself and held her up in a hurry. He said embarrassedly, "Sister, I'm sorry." "Did I scare you?" Qin was a little scared. She said, "What happened just now?" She said what? Qin Sheng did not know how to explain. He could only say helplessly, "Maybe it's because I've been used to it for so many years. I always stay awake when I sleep." After hearing what Qin Sheng said, Qin Ran understood what was going on. It was because Qin Sheng had been living in fear during this period of time. He did not even dare to sleep soundly. After all, he had to be on guard against the enemies hiding behind him at all times. Qin Ran held Qin Sheng in her arms and said, "Don't do this again. I will protect you. I won't let anyone bully you again." Qin Sheng was touched. What was family love? Blood was thicker than water. Even though he just met his sister, Qin Sheng could feel his sister's feelings for him. "Sister, I'm a little hungry." Qin Sheng was still not used to Qin Ran's love for him. Last night, he was touched by the scene and his emotions were too strong. Qin Sheng felt a little embarrassed after he calmed down. So he changed the topic. "Sister, I'm a little hungry." Qin Sheng was still not used to Qin Ran's love for him. Last night, he was touched by the scene and his emotions were too strong. After calming down today, Qin Sheng felt a little embarrassed. So he changed the topic. Now that they were back in Beijing, Qin Ran would try her best to satisfy any of Qin Sheng's requests. Hearing that he was hungry, she immediately let go of Qin Sheng and said, "Go wash up. I'll take you to breakfast. There's an old restaurant in the alley outside. We used to eat there when we were young. It's still open." Qin Sheng nodded with a smile and went to wash up. Qin Ran didn't forget to say, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. It snowed last night. Open the window and have a look. This is the first snow in Beijing this year. Beijing hasn't seen such heavy snow for several years. You just happen to catch it. It means that Beijing is also welcoming you home." Qin Sheng, who had just walked to the bathroom, turned back and ran to the balcony immediately. Qin Sheng liked snow and did not like rain. When he was in Xi'an, he liked Zhongnan Mountains when it snowed the most. It was as beautiful as a painting. Qin Ran was the same. This pair of brother and sister had many similar hobbies. After all, they were not family. Opening the window, Qin Sheng was a little excited to see the snow-covered world outside. The wind was cold and the snow was flying. The whole world was chaotic. He couldn't help but take 2 breaths of cold air. He almost choked. Then he laughed like a child. Before he could enjoy this snowy world enough, Qin ran to him and pulled his arm. "Don't look at it. Go wash up first. When we go out later, I'll take you to see enough." Qin Sheng left reluctantly and went to the bathroom to wash up. Last night, Gong Sun had sent all the necessary daily necessities over, so they had everything they needed. After washing up, the pair dressed up neatly and could not wait to go out. As soon as they went downstairs, they felt the biting cold wind outside. The cold wind mixed with snowflakes hit their faces like knives. They didn't know how those children played. Maybe they just came out of the warm house. They would get used to it after a while. Qin Ran held Qin Sheng's arm and was ready to take him to walk around in the yard to get familiar with this familiar but now strange environment. Maybe he could recall more memories. Zhuang Zhou and Nangong, who had been waiting for them in the car, saw them coming out. They thought they were going back to the Sihiyuan, so they quickly got off the car to welcome them. Qin Ran was a little surprised. "You were in the car last night?" Nangong looked a little pale. He nodded with grievance. It was a hard night. Zhuang Zhou didn't care. He just looked at the pair of brother and sister with a smile. Qin Ran didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why didn't you go back to rest? If you went back to the Sihiyuan, I would definitely call you. Alas, it's my fault. I didn't tell you." "Sister, are we going back now?" Nangong asked weakly. Qin Ran said with embarrassment, "Wait a little longer. I'll take him around the yard and have breakfast. Then we'll go back. By the way, what do you want to eat? I'll bring it back for you later." Nangong wanted to find a bed and sleep now. Hearing that they had to wait a little longer, he felt somewhat helpless. But he still had to wait. So he said, "As long as we can fill our stomachs." Qin Ran looked at Zhuang Zhou and asked, "What about Uncle Zhuang?" "Whatever." Zhuang Zhou chuckled. Qin Sheng looked at Nangong up and down. Such a beautiful girl was shivering in the cold. Her pitiful look made people feel pity for her more or less. However, he was more curious about this beautiful girl. He didn't know what relationship she had with the Qin family. She had been following Zhuang Zhou these days. He could understand that Zhuang Zhou could do many things. After all, Zhuang Zhou was not an ordinary person, but Nangong was just an ordinary woman. Wasn't it a bit too much? Nangong and Zhuang Zhou wanted to follow Qin Ran, but Qin Ran insisted. After all, there wouldn't be any danger here. Even so, Zhuang Zhou still followed them from a distance in case of accidents. The planning commission was very big. There were many different yards. Qin Ran took Qin Sheng to wander in the yard. They talked about family trifles and childhood memories. On the way, they met some acquaintances such as uncles and aunties who were very familiar with Qin Ran. They knew that this girl often came here, but they only knew the story of the Qin family in the past. They didn't know much about the current Qin family. Some uncles and aunties stared at Qin Sheng and asked, Ran, is this your boyfriend?" Qin Ran shook her head with a smile and said, "No, this is my brother." The uncles and aunties didn't ask too much. They just smiled and praised him out of politeness. Then they left quietly. This old restaurant was in the alley behind the yard. After Qin Ran brought Qin Sheng in, the boss immediately recognized her. He said, "Hey, Ran, I haven't seen you for a long time. Why are you here today? Maybe because of the heavy snow last night, no one was willing to go out. There were no customers in the old restaurant. Only 2 tables of people were eating breakfast. The boss and the lady boss greeted them. Qin Ran smiled and explained, Uncle Wong, I've been busy recently. I'm free today. After the boss and the lady boss exchanged some polite words with Qin Ran, they naturally focused on Qin Sheng. They asked like those uncles and aunties, is this your boyfriend? He's so handsome. Qin Ran didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, Uncle Wong, Aunt Song, you definitely can't recognize him. This is my brother. Do you remember the little boy who always came to buy soy milk? Your brother? The boss and the lady boss said blankly. Then they stared at Qin Sheng again and again, as if they wanted to see through him. After about 10 seconds, they suddenly said, Oh, I remember. I was wondering why he looked so familiar. I haven't seen him for so many years. The little guy has become a big guy. We can't recognize him. Qin Sheng didn't expect that the boss and the lady boss could recognize him. Maybe they didn't either. After all, so many years had passed. He was just responding politely. But he still smiled and said, Uncle Wong, Aunt Song, hello. The boss and the lady boss greeted Qin Sheng politely as if they had just met yesterday, which made Qin Sheng somewhat uncomfortable. After the greetings, Qin Sheng and Qin Ran found a table and sat down. Qin Ran smiled at Qin Sheng and said, soy milk, fried dough sticks, and a tea egg. It's your favorite when you were young. Although Qin Sheng's eating habits had changed, he still nodded and agreed in order to regain the memories of those years. Not long after, the lady boss brought the soy milk and fried dough sticks. Qin Ran smiled and said, You must be hungry. Eat quickly. Maybe he was really hungry. Qin Sheng ate 2 mouthfuls of the fried dough sticks and drank some soy milk. He felt that the taste was really good, so he didn't care about anything else and just wanted to fill his stomach first. Qin Ran was not very hungry. After eating a fried dough stick and drinking some soy milk, she watched Qin Sheng wolfing down the food. Until Qin Sheng was full, she considerately handed a tissue to him. Is it delicious? Qin Ran said with a smile. Qin Sheng nodded and said, It's delicious. If you're full, then let's go back. We'll come again in the future, Qin Ran said softly. She stood up to pay the bill and took the takeaway breakfast. After chatting with the boss and the lady boss for a while, Qin Ran took Qin Sheng out of this old restaurant. After returning to the community, Qin Ran first gave the breakfast to Nangong and Zhuangzhou. Then she turned around and said to Qin Sheng, It's time to go back and see our father. Chapter 352. Chapter 351, It was really him. I have been abroad these days, so the updates are not stable. Please forgive me. The Sihiyuan of the Qin family was located on the west street of Dengshiku. Everyone knew that the Sihiyuan in that area was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. As long as the Sihiyuan looked mysterious, it must be the residence of a rich or noble person. The Sihiyuan of the Qin family was hidden among them, but it was not so conspicuous. There were many mansions in Sijia City, such as number 7 Daitai Courtyard, which was next to Daitai and could overlook Yuan Park. However, many of the nouveau riche or nouveau riche liked them. The real tycoons in Sijia City liked to live in Sihiyuan. A Sihiyuan with 3 entrances and 3 exits cost a lot. What kind of person could live in it? Of course, some people would say that if you were really powerful, you should live in the minister's building in Muxadai, or in the general community in Shijingshan, or in the Sihiyuan on Fuyo Street. Although this was true, how many people in this city could reach the top of the pyramid? It took about 20 minutes to go from Sanlai Community to Dengshiku West Street, but it might take about an hour because of the snow today. From Fujiman Inner Street to Wenjin Street to Jingshan Front Street to Dongxi South Street, there were many sceneries along the way, but Qin Sheng wanted to see Chong and Street, which was known as the first street in China. Unfortunately, he had no chance to do so last night or today. However, this route was much more beautiful than last night's direct route to Sanlai. After all, he could enjoy Beihai Park and Jingshan in the snow. Zhuangzhou and Nangong were in front. This was the last part of their mission. They had been really tired during this period, following Qin Sheng from Hangzhou to Huangmei County to Zhejiang to Tsingtao and finally back to Beijing. If they were ordinary people, they would have been exhausted. Qin ran and Qin Sheng sat in the back and asked casually, "Qin Sheng, have you been to Beijing since you grew up?" Qin Sheng, who was looking at the busy traffic and the tall buildings in the distance through the window, turned around and said, "No. My roommate in college is from Beijing. He kept asking us to come here, but we didn't get a chance. Then I'll show you around during this period. You have been to those places when you were young, but I guess you don't have any memory of them," Qin Ran said half-jokingly. Qin Sheng said with a smile, "We'll talk about it later." The scenery on the road was really good. The city of Beijing in the snow had a different charm, just like Xi'an after it snowed. It made people feel like they were back in Chong. And so Beijing became Beijing after it snowed. Especially when he passed by Jingshan Front Street. There was Jingshan Park on one side, and the mountain not far away was covered with snow. The scenery was picturesque. However, when he saw Jingshan, the first thing that came to his mind was the crooked tree. The Ming Dynasty had come to an end. On the other side, it was the world-famous Forbidden City. The Forbidden City in the snow was really intoxicating. Qin Sheng did not have much memory of the Forbidden City. Therefore, he definitely wanted to visit the Forbidden City Museum when he had the time. An hour later, they finally arrived at the front street of Dengshiku. The car turned into an alley and stopped in front of a Sihiyuan. Obviously, this courtyard house had been renovated and was obviously different from those ordinary courtyard houses. However, many courtyard houses in this alley were like this. They looked quite mysterious from the outside. The courtyard wall with green bricks and gray tiles was very high, and the gate was even more imposing. Nangong had informed Gongsun in advance. When they heard the horn outside, the gate was immediately opened from the inside. 2 bodyguards in black coats were standing at the gate. Zhuang Zhou drove the car in. After the car stopped, Qin Sheng's expression began to become a little serious. He was wondering who his father was. Was he really the uncle he thought he was? If it was in the past, Qin Sheng would not dare to imagine this kind of thing at all. However, many things happened during this period were beyond his imagination. Too many impossible things became possible. Qin Sheng dared not to believe it. Before they got out of the car, a bodyguard came over and opened the door. He bowed his head respectfully, like a bodyguard from Zongnanhai, which made people feel very stressed. Qin Ran was the first to get out of the car. The 2 bodyguards immediately said, "Young lady." Qin Sheng got out of the car after her. The others did not know Qin Sheng's identity, so they just nodded slightly. At this time, Zhuang Zhou and Nangong also got out of the car. At this time, Gongsun was already standing not far away. He represented Qin Chang'an to welcome Qin Sheng. Beside him was a young man in a suit and leather shoes. He was wearing gold-rimmed glasses and looked very elegant. Gongsun, who was dressed very well, said to Qin Sheng with a proud face, "Young master, welcome home." The young man in the gold-rimmed glasses also smiled slightly and said, "Welcome home, young master." Qin Sheng was a little stunned. This seemed to be a ceremony of the rich and powerful families in ancient times, which made him somewhat unaccustomed. After all, he had been a poor loser for more than 20 years. He had never thought that he would become such a role one day. Qin Ran's eyes looked a little disdainful and unhappy because she did not see Qin Chang'an. However, when she looked at Qin Sheng, she immediately returned to that kind of doting expression and said, "Don't mind him. Our father just likes these fancy things." After that, Qin Ran held Qin Sheng's hand and walked forward. She said to Gongsun discontentedly, "Uncle Gongsun, why didn't he come out?" Gongsun glanced at the Audi not far away, then walked forward quickly and said to Qin Ran, "A guest came to visit this morning. He is still talking in the study now. You can go to the side hall and wait. I guess it will be over soon." Qin Ran snorted and said, "He is really busy. What is more important than the return of his own son?" Gongsun could only smile bitterly. Things just happened to come here. That person came to visit directly without an appointment. Obviously, Qin Chang'an could not refuse. Last night, Qin Chang'an had waited for half the night. In the morning, he got up early to wait. In the end, he waited for an uninvited guest. This was the front yard. There were 4 cars parked in the yard. In addition to the Mercedes-Benz that picked Qin Sheng up, there was a Toyota Alpha Nanny van, an Audi A8L, and a Bentley Mulsanne. The Audi A8L was the car of the guest who came to visit. Qin Ren did not know what to say to Qin Chang'an. He had been separated from his own son for so many years. Now he finally got to see him again. Although he had seen him before, he should at least respect him. Couldn't he refuse all the social activities and work? If it were not for her temper, Qin Ren really wanted to take Qin Sheng away. Anyway, she would not stay here to see other people's faces. Qin Ren did not care. She looked at the Sihiyuan casually. She did not know how big the Sihiyuan was, but the front yard was not small. It could totally park 5 or 6 cars. The gate of the front yard was also very luxurious. There were solid wood carvings on it, which should have been old. The center of the yard was paved with bluestone. There were flowers and plants around it. There were also 2 medium-sized national pagoda trees. On the wall facing the gate, there were 4 big characters written in cursive calligraphy. The Great Way is Wu Wei. It should be the calligraphy of a famous calligrapher. Otherwise, it would not have such inner strength. Qin Sheng followed Qin Ran and Gong Sun through an arched door. Instantly, he seemed to have walked into a new world. The space inside was very big, which was far from those ordinary small Sihiyuan. The 3 sides of the yard were surrounded by 3 2-story small buildings, all of which were made of bricks and wood. They looked magnificent. The middle of the yard was divided into several areas by bluestone. Each area seemed to have its own function. There was also a pavilion in the corner, in which there were stone tables and stone benches. Qin Sheng could not help sighing. Maybe this was the top-notch Sihiyuan that he often saw on the internet. This building was worth hundreds of millions. It was far from what an ordinary nouveau riche could afford. At the same time, there were several bodyguards and black windbreakers in the yard. A few servants were shuttling back and forth. When they saw Gong Sun and Qin Ran, they all stopped and slightly lowered their heads. Qin Ran greeted them politely. She had a good relationship with these uncles and aunties who had been in the Qin family for many years. Qin Sheng looked at them calmly, but he was extremely shocked in his heart. From the very beginning until now, the information that he already knew made it very clear in his heart that this father of his was really not an ordinary person. Zhuang Zhou and Nangong did not follow them in. Only the young man with gold-rimmed glasses followed behind, keeping a distance of 3 meters from them. Outside, Nangong and Zhuang Zhou had already left. Nangong could not help but sigh. Our mission is finally over. We can go home and have a good rest. It's over for me, but not for you, Zhuang Zhou said thoughtfully. Nangong was stunned for a few seconds. He did not understand what was going on. Then he stared at Zhuang Zhou and asked, "Uncle Zhuang, what do you mean?" Zhuang Zhou smiled and said nothing. Anyway, he could not follow Qin Sheng around in the future. After entering the main building, they first came to the main hall. There were 2 men in Chinese tunic suits standing at the staircase. Obviously, they were not the Qin family's bodyguards. They looked at Qin Sheng with interest. They did not look away until Qin Ran showed anger on her face. After entering the main building, Qin Sheng was more like Granny Lu entering the Grandview Garden. The decoration of the whole main building was very exquisite, especially with the profound meaning of feng shui. Ordinary people might pay more attention to the expensive furniture and various kinds of antique ornaments and paintings. They could not see through these mysteries. However, Qin Sheng was taught by the old master himself. How could he not understand these mysteries? But then he figured it out. He was the old master's grandson, but this father was the old master's biological son. How could he not understand these things? Moreover, with his status, he could totally find those big shots to decorate in person. As for the antique furniture, ornaments, and paintings, Qin Sheng had been to Jiang Xianbang's garden Western-style building. Except for a few things that shocked him, he was not surprised by the rest, such as the 2 paintings of Zhao Wuji and Zhang Deqian and an ancient bronze tripod. Qin Ran led Qin Sheng to sit on the sofa in the side hall. She criticized Qin Chang'an bluntly. "Do you think it's very exaggerated?" This is the aesthetic taste of middle-aged men. But don't worry, I will definitely not let you live here. China style also has a different taste, Qin Sheng said honestly. If it was the so-called new China style, Qin Sheng really could not understand it. But this kind of China style with the antique ornaments really had a taste. Qin ran directly side and said, like father, like son. You have the same aesthetic taste as your father. Qin Sheng had nothing to say. Gong Sun, who was behind him, almost could not help laughing. Qin ran turned to Gong Sun and said, Uncle Gong Sun, where is he? I'll go and call him. The study. Gong Sun knew that he could not stop her, so he could only tell the truth. Qin Ran immediately went to the second floor. Gong Sun was afraid that Qin Ran did not know who the study was and randomly entered, so he hurriedly followed her. The young man did not follow them into the side hall. In an instant, only Qin Sheng was left in the side hall. A servant poured a cup of tea for Qin Sheng and then left. Qin Sheng just waited like this. After waiting for about 5 minutes, he heard footsteps on the stairs. The footsteps were very light and steady. Just when he looked at the staircase, the footsteps were very light and steady. Chapter 353. Go ahead and ask. Murphy's Law appeared once again. This was the result that Qin Sheng did not want to see the most, but it happened. This man was indeed the man with an extraordinary aura that he had met in Shaman. He was also his father. When Qin Sheng saw this man for the first time, he knew that this man was definitely not an ordinary person. Ordinary people would not have such an aura. Moreover, he had said that he was from Beijing. However, the explanation he gave Qin Sheng was that he was just a retired old cadre. Why did Qin Sheng dare to guess that this man might be his father? Firstly, when Qin Sheng saw the young and handsome father in the photo on the wall in the old house, he felt that this man was somewhat similar to the man he had met in Shaman. Although one's appearance would change as one grew older, the change would not be as drastic as the difference between heaven and earth. One could still make out the general outline. Secondly, after returning to Beijing, Qin Ran rarely mentioned this father. Obviously, she was hiding something. Even when they were in the old house, she did not deliberately introduce him. This was a problem. Thirdly, the first time Qin Sheng met Qin Ran was in Shaman. The first time he met this man was also in Shaman. This was a bit too much of a coincidence. When a few coincidences were added together, it was not a coincidence anymore. It was intentional. Moreover, Qin Ran's coincidence had been overturned. At this moment, another coincidence was also overturned. Qin Chang'an walked down the stairs slowly and looked at Qin Sheng with a smile on his face. Qin Sheng was stunned and did not know how to respond for a moment. This reaction was also within Qin Chang'an's expectation. Some things needed time, and the things that had happened to Qin Sheng during this period of time needed more time to buffer. Qin Chang'an did not rush to enter the side hall. At this time, a middle-aged man walked down the stairs and said somewhat humbly, Chang'an, please help me with this. I have no other way now. The middle-aged man was half a head shorter than Qin Chang'an. He was well-proportioned and did not have a big belly like most people. However, his hair was sparse and his head was slightly bald. He looked very haggard. Qin Chang'an patted the middle-aged man's shoulder and said, I'm not sure about this. Wait for my call. If I really can't do it, don't blame me. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. The middle-aged man said, shaking his head. This was his last hope. He had no choice but to give it a try. At this time, the middle-aged man also noticed Qin Sheng in the side hall, so he was very sensible and said, Chang'an, then you go ahead with your work. I won't bother you anymore. Let's meet again later. Okay. Qin Chang'an nodded and said to Gong Sun behind him, Gong Sun, send Lao Lu out for me. The middle-aged man turned around and left quickly. The moment he turned around, his expression was no longer so humble. Instead, he revealed a kind of killing aura of a superior. This change made Qin Sheng, who had witnessed the whole process, a little dazed. The two bodyguards also followed him and left. Gong Sun Pei smiled and followed behind them. Qin Chang'an stood still and did not have the intention to send the middle-aged man out of the main hall. That was because the middle-aged man's fate had been determined long ago. He would not get involved in this mess. Moreover, the middle-aged man had taken the liberty to disturb Qin Chang'an today without an invitation, which made Qin Chang'an very uncomfortable. Qin Ran took something from upstairs and went downstairs. Standing beside Qin Chang'an, she said in a strange tone, "Master Qin is Master Qin. Uncle Liu is such a big figure, but he also has to ask for your help. But I really want to know which is more important, the outsider or your son who has been separated from you for more than 20 years. Don't you know what day it is today? If you really don't want to recognize this son, you can rest assured that I will take my brother away. I will definitely not bother you in the future." Qin Ran's words were a little harsh. She did not take Qin Chang'an seriously at all. After all, she felt that Qin Chang'an had gone too far today. They had informed him last night. When they returned to the Sihiyuan this morning, Qin Chang'an had enough time to decline all the things. Why was he still dealing with the so-called outsiders before Qin Sheng came back? This was completely disrespectful to Qin Sheng. What would Qin Sheng think? Would he be bitterly disappointed? Qin Sheng had lost his father and mother for so many years. When he was about to see his biological father, he did not expect that his biological father was still busy with other things and directly left him here. What kind of father would do this? Not to mention that they had been separated from each other for more than 20 years. Even if they did not see each other for half a month, it was estimated that this father would be happy to hear that his son was back. No matter what Qin Ran said, Qin Chang'an would never refute, let alone get angry. No matter how she went too far, Qin Chang'an still tolerated her. Because for him, as a father, this was his daughter. He could only spoil and spoil her. They could be father and daughter in this life, who did not know how many generations of fate they had cultivated, must cherish it. Therefore, this time, Qin Chang'an still behaved like an honest man without any temper. He patted Qin Ran's shoulder and said, "I asked them to make some dishes that you like. Go and have a look. What else do you like to eat? It is rare for your brother to come back, so I will cook in the evening." Qin Ran stared at her father and left sensibly, because she had to give this long-lost father and son some time alone. Now Qin Sheng had begun to accept her, but he might not be able to accept Qin Chang'an. After Qin Ran left, only the father and son were left in the side hall. Qin Ran had also informed others not to come over, leaving enough space for them. On the sofa, not far away, Qin Sheng did not say a word. He squinted and stared at Qin Chang'an thoughtfully. He had recovered from the initial absent-mindedness. After Qin Chang'an went home, he dressed casually, wearing a casual sportswear, because he would jog every morning. If the weather was good, he would run on the street outside in the alley, greet many old neighbors, and eat breakfast in the old restaurant. If the weather was bad, he would exercise in the gym in the side building, which had everything. Qin Chang'an walked slowly to Qin Sheng and said casually, "Surprised?" In fact, at this moment, although he looked calm on the outside, he was feeling uneasy and nervous in his heart. He knew how to deal with a lot of people. Whether it was feigning civility or scheming against each other, he was already used to it. However, he did not know how to deal with Qin Sheng, his own son, because Qin Sheng was not an outsider, nor was he Qin Ran. This was Qin Chang'an's opening remark. Qin Sheng was surprised again. He hesitated for a while and then replied, "I am surprised, but not surprised. Although I guessed it was possible, I do not want it to be like this because I don't know how to face you." Qin Sheng could not associate the uncle he had met in Xiamen with his so-called father in front of him. Moreover, the feeling that they gave him was very different. That uncle was kind and amiable like a neighbor. He could talk to Qin Sheng about many things, including astronomy, geography, and the ways of the world. However, the father in front of him made Qin Sheng feel distant, because he already knew a lot of things. This father was not like the uncle next door, but a real hidden big shot. How should I say this? Some things are like this. Whether you accept it or not, the truth is the truth. You already know a lot of things and who I am, but you can still treat me as that uncle. Qin Chang'an really did not know how to talk with Qin Sheng. Qin Sheng was different from Qin Ran. Qin Sheng was a man, the heir of the Qin family in the future. He could not treat Qin Sheng like he treated Qin Ran. He would definitely be very strict with Qin Sheng. Qin Ran was a woman, and Qin Chang'an only hoped that she could live a happy life without the so-called pressure and responsibility. Qin Sheng sneered and said, "Do you think it's possible?" Qin Chang'an also smiled awkwardly and did not know how to answer. This time, Qin Sheng did not make an awkward silence. Instead, he took the initiative and asked, "I have a lot of questions, and I asked my sister, but she said that she did not know a lot of things. You must know, so I came back to Beijing to ask you. Ask whatever you want, but the premise is that you want me to treat you as a real man or a child who has not grown up and matured. If it's the former, I will tell you the truth, but I am afraid that you may not be able to bear it. If it's the latter, I have the necessary countermeasures," Qin Chang'an said honestly. The reason why he said so was to continue to test Qin Sheng. He was so cruel. Since Qin Chang'an had said so, of course Qin Sheng would not choose the former. So he said without hesitation, "I am a real man." Then asked. Qin Chang'an smiled and shook his head. Most of the time, the truth was cruel, but most people wanted to know the truth. Lies were beautiful, and they would make people feel better. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.